Thank you. Honourable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precincts of Parliament, and it does constitute a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything that is said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute it when recognized to speak. The microphones are very sensitive and it will pick up noise which may disturb the attention of other members. And when recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and connect your video if possible. We are aware of the load shedding, so if your feed is poor and there's not enough bandwidth, you may switch off your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which is an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise a point of order. The Secretariat will assist me in this regard. And when using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. Lastly, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini-plenary session, and therefore any decisions will be taken in a full plenary session of the National Assembly. The first item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honourable K E Magaxa on building a state-led South African mixed economy with the participation of both public and private sectors to contribute towards a new trajectory of inclusive growth and to address the apartheid legacy of exclusion. I now recognize the Honourable Magaxa.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think your introduction to the subject says all. I just have to add to what you have just said. The full potential of South Africa's mixed economy still remains to be realized through the economic construction and recovery plan. When compared to other mixed economies in the developing world, South Africa's mixed economy often does not live up to the economic potential attributed to a mixed economy by its staunchest defenders. To be a mixed economy success, to put a mixed economic success in perspective, consider the case of Sweden. It boosts strong property rights and it's also open to international trade as well as foreign direct investment. Yet Sweden has a strong, aggressive social insurance and robust distribution based on public expenditure on social welfare programs such as old age pensions, family allowances, health insurance, and housing subsidies. It was unthinkable for the Swedish that Sweden could be one of the world's most egalitarian countries given their history of inequalities and wealth concentration. The case of Sweden offers one important lesson, that possibilities for inclusive economic development tend to be done in joint efforts between the public and the private sectors. Of course, by referencing the case of Sweden, I am not trying to blind anyone to the success stories of South Africa's mixed economy. We have our own success stories. For instance, South Africa is home to generous direct cash transfers such as social grants that play a crucial role in reducing poverty and inequalities. But after taking such direct cash transfers into account, equal distribution of assets and income remains elusive in the country. For yet another example, South Africa's mixed economy pays greater homage to market forces and is open to trade as well as investment, but it is experiencing low rates of fixed investment and disindustrialization of the industrial sectors that the country had managed to build since 1994. The result is often a high level of unemployment and exposure to wild price fluctuation of basic goods. To sum it up, South Africa's mixed economy falls short of inclusive representation in the sense that the representation of the previous marginalized Black people is laxer. Without effective state intervention in South Africa's mixed economy, the previously marginalized Black people will invariably get the short end of the stick. But advocating for effective state intervention does not imply that one views the private sector with a more skeptical eye. The crucial point underlying effective state intervention is that inclusive economic development is not a purely private sector process, but a joint process between the public and the private sector, with the state playing a leading role. There are several reasons as to why effective state intervention is necessary for economic transformation and inclusive economic development in South Africa's economic context. Let me reiterate one of the reasons briefly. First of all, South Africa's mixed economy exhibits monopoly practices and market concentration, where large firms are able to cement their power and subsequently expand their market share as well as their rentier behavior. However, the situation is more extreme than this because of the accumulating evidence that high levels of profit stemming from monopoly practices and market concentration translate into high level of brownfield rather than the greenfield investment. In other words, high level of profit either perpetuate the mantra of shareholder wealth maximization or facilitate the swelling of emerging firms by large through various strategies to the detriment of the setting up new production facilities in a mixed economic desperation for high economic growth rate and job creation. That is exactly the antithesis of profitable patriotism. In South Africa's mixed economy with monopoly practices and market concentration, the orthodox economic justification for relying on market forces signal for economic transformation and inclusive economic development fades. In short, the market will never allocate resources efficiently, let alone self-correct. Hence, effective state intervention is important. Yet, despite the noteworthy role of effective state intervention in South Africa's mixed economy, the poor performance and management of state-owned entities have tarnished every effort, every extensive, coordinated socio-economic intervention of the state in the economy. To put this in provocative terms, Chairperson, although there is a wide acceptance of market failures in South Africa's mixed economy that leave large swathes of the impoverished citizens in the sideline, the state cannot correct them in ways that do not make things worse. While some of the critics of the effective state intervention approximate the truth, most of them are either incomplete or short-sighted, or even suffer from selective biasness. The reality is that the challenges that explain poor state-owned entities' performance apply also to large private firms with dispersed ownership. Indeed, for every struggling and liquidated state-owned entity, there is one or at most a few identifiable similar examples in the private sector. For instance, there are similarities between the South African Express and Kulula liquidations. This observation is, of course, not limited to liquidation. Therefore, for example, what is dubbed the state capture might have caused the good state-owned entities' performance to be in the reverse gear rather than forward gears through corrupt activities. But this does not negate the idea of the private sector as the domestic leader in illicit financial flows, money laundering, cybercrime, bribery and corruption, tax evasion, and procurement fraud. I always say the private sector is also responsible for the corruption in our public entities. Given all this, I must admit that I am very unhappy that state-owned entities have become a real nuisance in the everyday life of South African citizens and the economy, as evidenced by their gradual withdrawal from developmental mandates that they were originally created to serve. Unprecedented load shedding, as well as absence of forward and backward linkages in the form of lowering the cost of doing business to the strategic sectors of the economy, leave much to be desired. While the current performance of the state accentuate rather than ameliorate market failures and the enduring legacies of both colonialism and apartheid, this does not invalidate the use of the state-owned entities, facilities, economic transformation, and inclusive development. The highly respected Asian tiger economies have achieved their economic success with a large state-owned entities sector. This confirms that SOEs are the basis for effective state intervention to address socio-economic challenges from a people-centered approach and inclusive vision that is available to the private sector. It is due to this reason that the government has restructured the business models of this strategic state-owned entities such as Eskom, DNED, and Transnet onto a path of profitability. Such a restructuring, however, requires appropriately targeted public investment. Of course, the DA will attempt to convince us with its liberal shibboleth that public investment crowds out private investment, forgetting that this is true only when the economy is near full employment. What is widely known is that persistent lack of opportunities to enter the labor market, coupled with the inequalities in terms of access to quality education and healthcare services, consign the majority of work seekers who are predominantly Black to chronic and unemployment and poverty traps. Therefore, public investment should play a key role, not only to improve the poor state-owned performance, but also in relation to long-term economic transformation and inclusive economic development. Unfortunately, Chairperson, the problem of focusing on fiscal stabilization over other important goals, that means economic growth, job creation, and development, has cut public investment of all kinds. Of course, public-private partnership are outlined in the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan as option to improve state-owned performances and to address the insufficient infrastructure development in the country. But the presence of the public-private partnership does not just lack the public investment. Let me explain why. Not less well known, but ignore, is that capital as a nationality that is pays loyalty to. The upshot is that some of the private sector players that allude for inject capital to improve state-owned entities' performance and to address insufficient infrastructure development often do whatever it takes to increase their profit, even if it means implement cost-cutting measures, including slashing jobs. Related, some of the private sector players conceal their propaganda, which revealed makes them appear predatory. That is to say, they only wait for the state to fail before they intervene. And this should not be surprising because they are embedded in political relations that are completely geared towards marginalizing the state. Moreover, some of the private sector players have inherent bias because they are unwilling to finance infrastructure projects that have high returns in the long term but carry high risk in the short term. For example, opportunity for Transnet to expand its railway network to promote intermodal linkages to revive the decreasing connectivity with rural markets. Similarly, there is a need for new oil refineries to minimize South Africa's dependence on important refined petroleum products. This project remains on the drawing board because there is no patriotic capital in our country to improve or to inject mixed economy to ensure its development. Given that the economic development and inefficiencies associated with private sector are highly exaggerated, obvious solution is for the government to strengthen its development finance institutions, to finance long-term infrastructure projects, and to promote aggressive entrepreneurship. This shows that the necessity for effective state intervention is even more clear-cut. It is crucial that public-private partnership are able to succeed to ensure that South Africa's mixed economy is able to reach its full potential. We need African lions to improve economic growth in our country, region, and on the continent, broadly speaking. Honorable Chairperson, I wish I had more time to highlight and at great length both empirical and theoretical argument in support of effective state intervention. All what I want to conclude is that it is most important for our country with its history of inequalities for the state to lead in the implementation of transformation in our country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable De Villiers.
Chairperson, Doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. This debate comes at an interesting time. It wants us to debate a state-led South African economy with the participation of both public and private sectors to contribute towards a new trajectory of inclusive growth and to address the apartheid legacy of exclusion. So it seems to hint that there is some sort of new leadership role that the ANC government should start playing in fostering partnership between public and private sectors that would lead to inclusive growth. Chair, ever since President Ramaphosa's SONA speech earlier this year, there seems to be a focus in ANC speeches on the importance of small and medium-sized businesses, so-called SMMEs. It is well understood fact that we as the DA agree with that no part of the economy has the potential to scale up and create economic growth and employment like the SMME sector. But here is the problem. What the ANC-led government says about SMMEs and how they treat them is two fundamentally different things. Yesterday, a Public Service Commission presentation revealed that the current ANC-led government owes SMMEs a staggering 9 billion rand in unpaid invoices. 9 billion rand. Just let that sink in. While SMMEs are struggling to recover from the ANC's unscientific hard lockdown regulations under COVID, rising and out-of-control crime under the SAPS, failing state infrastructure, sharply rising inflation and pressure on consumers with out-of-control food costs, rising petrol prices, and now stage 6 load shedding, which devastates every single SMME in the country, the ANC government could not even care enough about the plight of SMMEs by paying them on time. It is therefore no surprise that the only province where the government owes SMMEs zero is the DA-run Western Cape. Saying you care for SMMEs is lip service if you don't even pay them. Chair, so why then? Why on earth would the ANC talk about the importance of SMMEs, but then act in a manner that sets out to destroy them? The answer is actually quite simple. A complete incapable state run by absolutely useless ANC cadres who have not been employed in government based on their capabilities, but politically based on their ANC membership card in their pocket. ANC cadre deployment is the root cause of every single failure of government to even attempt creating a more inclusive society. The failure of Eskom, SAPS, SAA, PRASA, the Post Office, SABC, the list goes on and on. What does all these failed state institutions have in common? ANC cadre deployment and corruption. Because the only way the ANC fat cats can enrich themselves is through the mechanism of cadre deployment. Chair, there's only one way to create a more inclusive society and break the back of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. That is a state service run by professionals, such as the example we find in the DA-led Western Cape and DA-led municipalities. In the DA-run Western Cape, SMMEs get paid their invoices for the simple reason that the DA-led province and municipalities are run by professionals, not by cadres. Chair, the writing is on the wall. Voters no longer are willing to do the same thing and expect different results. In 2024, the insanity of an ANC cadre-led government will end, and that will be the true start of a road towards a more equal South Africa, run by a caring DA-led coalition and a professional state. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Buthelezi.
Thank you very much.
No, it's the Honorable N.S. Buthelezi from the ANC.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because...
Yes. No, thank you, Honorable Member. I made an error by not giving the initials of the member. My apologies for that. So it's the Honorable N.S. Buthelezi from the ANC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable House Chair. Obviously, there are many Osheng on the platform. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is critically important that I raise upfront what I consider to be non-negotiable as we deal with this very important matter, which will define the present and the future of this country. These include the economy should grow. This growth must also include township, rural women and people living with disabilities. The economy should embrace employment equity. The economy must put localization at the center so that it creates more jobs. It should be an economy that provides a safety net for the most vulnerable sections of our community, which unfortunately the DA doesn't care about. It is important to restate the obvious, which some of us decided to be untruthful about. The state of poverty, landlessness, exclusion, inequality is not natural, but it is man-made. It is the situation that was created when those three vessels landed in our shores. We are dealing with the problems of the dromedaries, the Goedewop and the Reiger. Sinje indaba yale ndoda uYohani Jan van Riebeeck. Wasuka lapho ukuhlupheka kwethu. Wasuka lapho ukuhlupheka komuntu omnyama. Sasinomhlaba, sifuyile, sidla sisutha, bafika ogombela kwesakhe, bathatha konke. It was this realization that prompted Comrade Nelson Mandela to observe, I quote, "Massive poverty and obscene inequality are such terrible stages of our times, times in which the world boasts breathtaking advances in science, technology, industry, and wealth accumulation. They have to rank alongside slavery and apartheid." Also, this mess we are dealing with today did not start, would like us to believe. The DA and FF class in particular want us to all of a sudden forget about homelands, Land Acts of 1913 and 1986. They want us to forget about the Job Reservation Act, about education. The list is endless of the laws that were meant to exclude and oppress Black people of this country. Honorable members, the question therefore is, how does the ANC-led government unscramble this apartheid omelette? That's what we are addressing here. That's why we believe that to undo this apartheid omelette designed and enforced ruthlessly, the state must play a pivotal role. We firmly believe in the mixed economy, meaning that the state, the private sector, NGOs, and civil society have a role to play. What was made and imposed by the state for 3.5 centuries upon the rightful owners of this country cannot be left to the whims of private sector alone. We all know it is in the nature of private sector to maximize profits and profits only. Anything else in that equation is incidental. On the other hand, the objective function of the state is to optimize public goods for the benefit of all of its citizens. The state wants to ensure that by its intervention in the economy grows, its citizens are employed, the receiver gets what is due to it, not for an individual, but for the populace at large. That is why in the current financial year in this house approved, amongst others, 9.9 billion rand for Sanral for non-toll road maintenance, 2.1 billion rand for Glen William Dam, 1.4 billion rand for Olifantsfontein and Ebenezer plants, 15 billion rand for the bounce back scheme to support SMMEs, 17.5 billion rand over MTF for infrastructure catalytic project, and 67.7 billion rand as transfers and subsidies to the Department of Transport, mainly to deal with the road and rail infrastructure. These resources by this house prove the centrality of government in leading in our project of inclusive growth. The ANC is walking the talk. There's no doubt that with better roads, water supply, private sector will also be encouraged to co-invest. By the way, honorable members, there's no economy in the world, including the most capitalist economies, where only the private sector plays. This is a lie perpetuated by the free market fundamentalists as represented in this house. Please do not come with experiments that never work everywhere, let alone in the emerging economies. Nifuna ukusibambisa iqanda lenjelana, ngeke asisi. Uhulumeni wabantu ngaphansi kwakhongolose uyoqhubeka njalo abe phambili ekwakhweni komnotho walelizwe. Asikwazi ukushiya lokho kongqobankulu bona abazifonela ukwandisa inzuzo yabo kuphela. Kodwa siyoqhubeka njalo sisebenzisane nasomabhizinisi ukwakha umnotho walelizwe. When the July unrest hit KZN and Gauteng, businesses ran to the government for assistance. That's why this August House approved the second adjustment appropriation bill last year. That adjustment, among others, allocated 18.1 billion rand to SASRA to recapitalize it so that business could be assisted. You will remember that over 30 billion rand was approved by this house to assist businesses because we understand the role of business in growing our economy, paying taxes and creating employment. The lie by the DA, as we have just said, FFS plus, therefore should be exposed for what it is, which is a lie. They say the ANC does not want to work with business. All what we are saying is that let's play our roles and do not try to disenfranchise our people economically. As Oral Magaxa has just argued before, SOEs are here to stay because of their developmental role cannot be outsourced to the private sector. I'm not sure to the oral member who've just spoken whether Andre de Reiters, the CEO of ESCOM and the COO would
Honorable Buthelezi.
Agree with you when you talk about
Honorable Buthelezi,
card-carrying
my
members
apologies.
of the ANC. Perhaps not understand this overzealousness. Yes.
My apologies to interrupt you. Will you switch
Yes,
off your
yes,
video,
Chairperson.
please? Thank you. Please proceed.
It's off. I've switched
Yes.
it off, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do not understand this overzealousness of those who are pushing for privatization. This country is free. Anyone can start his or her business. Why are we not starting your own things rather than wanting to take the little that belongs to all of us? Zikaleleni is kapanzeni, issue ESCOM parts. Honorable members, let us accept that without energy and electricity, most of the progressive interventions by the ANC government will produce suboptimal outcomes. This House has already recapitalized ESCOM by 136 billion rand over the years. 88 billion rand is also earmarked for the period of up to 2025-26. In the spirit of the consensus that His Excellency, President Ramaphosa spoke about, let ESCOM, the board and management do their part. The people of South Africa are putting these resources to help them do their work. The load shedding that we are experiencing is undermining all the initiatives that are meant to grow the economy and create employment opportunities. We also reject the fallacious, unscientific argument of the free market fundamentalists who see privatization as a panacea of ESCOM problems. The Deputy President, Honorable Didi Mabuza, was here and stressed that there is no for sale sign for ESCOM. We agree with him, and that is the position of the African National Congress. In fact, the trend is now in the opposite direction internationally. Uniper, the biggest importer of natural gas in Germany, is being nationalized, again proving that in these hard times, we cannot leave the destiny of the country, especially with this strategic company, to private hands. For those who are salivating and hoping to get ESCOM, they must just chill. Honorable members, we support the initiatives to allow the private sector generation of electricity. Government gazetted 100 megawatts embedded generation, allowed municipalities to also generate their electricity. There are many other initiatives which are expected to add up to 13,000 megawatts to the grid. This is the mixed economy we as the African National Congress supports. Honorable members, we are greatly concerned about the reported application by ESCOM to NERSA for an increase of about 35% of the tariff. This will choke the economy and sterilize all the initiatives to reignite the economy and create jobs. Also, this move is inflationary, and it will add on the inflation from high fuel prices. This is a double jeopardy of note. Chairperson, we all agree that the inflation that we are having now is imported. It is not because of reckless behavior of consumers and business, completely exogenous. As the Minister of Finance shared with this House yesterday, the increase of interest rate under these circumstances further punishes and put more burden to the economy. This response by monetary authorities is stagflationary. It will result in high unemployment rate and low economic growth, no doubt about it. We are calling on the Minister of Finance to therefore intervene within his constitutional powers to ensure complementarity between our fiscal and monetary policies. Chairperson, SCOA had an opportunity to interact with the Department of Small Business, CEDA, and other institutions which fund Black business and SMMEs. These institutions are critical for inclusive growth. Unfortunately, Honorable Minister of Finance, there's no money to fund Black business to effectively participate in the economy. Honorable Minister, we are therefore calling on more resources to fund BEE. It is unacceptable to have other departments and institutions underspending by billions of rands while our people do not have access to capital. We hope to see a difference during MTBPS. To fund SMMEs and Black business is both a political and economic imperative. Politically, niyazi onke abakayikhonjwa basivalela ngaphandle ngobugovu babo. Babona ukuthi umnotho wezwe lethu ufanele bona kuphela. Bathi abanikazi begolide bamadayimane nomhlaba bafanele ukudla imbuya
Honorable
mnotho.
member,
Bona bapepenyeke
your time has now
bazenzele
expired.
ngomnotho wethu. I thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker is from the EFF.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. If there were people who had doubts that we should remove the governing party in the 2024 elections because it does not have a clear, believable, practical, and implementable plan to lead South Africa into a different economic trajectory that will lead to economic growth, then this debate should clear all those doubts for them. But what is more troubling is the fact that at a time when the ANC, together with its alliances, COSATU and the SACP, is going full steam ahead with privatization and liquidation of a strategic owned enterprises. The former Western Cape Provincial Secretary of the SACP still thinks that there could be a state-led mixed economy when the private sector controls all strategic sectors of the economy, including energy generation, transport, ports, telecommunications, finance, and mineral resources. Now, allow us to put this in misguided proposition into a clearer perspective. We'll do so because we are leading and we are dealing with people who come from a movement that once declared that it believed that through programs and policies of redistribution, it could produce new incentives to growth, which would benefit all, and made a call for growth through redistribution, not an imaginary trickle-down economic motivated parasitical capitalist pretending to be patriotic bourgeoisie. Today, the South African Post Office has closed more than 55 of its branches and has retrenched more than 2,000 workers, many of whom are left behind as workers find themselves with more difficult contracts. South African Airways was sold for 51 rand. Stripped of its assets, is now handed over to so-called strategic partners who bring nothing to the table, nothing but a corrupt patronage deal facilitated by Mr. Private Cordon. Denau, a former giant and strategic SOE, has lost critical skills. It's broke and cannot afford to pay its salaries. It has lost many of its book contracts because it cannot deliver on time. Transnet was a custodian of ports, rail, pipelines to ensure that the freight system in South Africa enables sustained growth and diversification of the country's goals. But today, ports and rail are handed over to so-called private investors who bring nothing but find everything in place. There is a deliberate plan in progress to collapse Eskom. Every time the incompetent and arrogant Andre de Ruyter wants to entrench independent power producers, he allows the system to collapse and subjects all of us to unwarranted and unnecessary electricity blackouts. Participation of the public and private sectors in a mixed economy in which the private sector profits from everything while the public sector sits on the sidelines, control nothing, produces nothing, and subjects all of us to the whims of greed is fundamentally stupid. Chairperson, the only way to get South Africa on an economic growth path that will allow us to deal with the racial inequality crisis that is currently producing unemployment and poverty amongst Black Africans is to do the following things currently urgently. So far, the ANC government has failed to use the procurement budget strategically. We must use more than 1.2 trillion of the state's procurement budget to incentivize localization. We must do away with privatization of Eskom, Denel, and Transnet, and other strategic SOEs. We must stabilize Eskom to ensure that there is a stable and dependent electricity supply. But to do this, Eskom CEO and COO must be fired with immediate effect. We must lead massive industrialization, particularly in areas that we are currently having advantage. We have young growing population and minerals that will lead to productive beneficiaries that employs people in all parts of the country to create new cities and economies. Lastly, we need to clarify the role of research and development in the new trajectory of inclusive growth. There seems to be a confusion in the ruling party about the role of artificial intelligence, robotics, and e-commerce. This is not the expansion of the telecommunication services to rural and informal areas. That is the delivery of basic infrastructure services. We need to teach all institutions of learning, particularly at the foundation level, the integration of artificial intelligence and robotics, and ensure that as many of our people can participate in e-commerce as possible. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Nkosi E.M. Buthelezi.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. We as the IFP are pleased that this topic is being debated today. This comes at a crucial time when South Africa needs the private sector to flourish in order to provide for more jobs for the millions of unemployed South Africans. As the IFP, we have consistently raised the issue of private sector receiving support and integrated as an equal partner with government in our growing economy. What appears, Honourable Chair, to be the greatest threat to South Africa next to the ravaging income inequality is the ruling party itself. It lacks the follow-through on any of its own policies, and every day it adds more restraints to the private sector. The economic circumstances of millions have remained largely unchanged as a result of the ANC-led government failure to deliver on any of its economic promises. Ironically, this debate is actually being introduced by a member of the ruling party when the cause of all our economic challenges that we are currently facing is the ruling party itself. This debate comes at a time when we find ourselves with a weakened rand, an incredible lowered GDP, and the cost of living crisis. The ruling party has over 28 years to lay the foundation for the strong development economy. As the IFP, we have been at the forefront of calling for a mixed and inclusive economy, but our calls have fallen on deaf ears with the ruling party. We have called for the privatization of the struggling SOEs or bring a private partner on board. This call has not been heeded by the same ANC. The mandate of the state-owned entities is to create jobs, develop skills, and provide crucial services. They are not fulfilling this mandate. In reality, they are working against it. The SOEs model is dead, as per the Bloomberg report, and the blame falls squarely on the ruling party's shoulder. We all understand that the primary duty of government is to create an environment for business to grow and entrepreneurs to flourish. This has not happened under the ANC, all because of their failures to follow through on their own policies. If you create an environment that makes it difficult for business to grow or for entrepreneurs to easily start a business with imposing never-ending red tapes, you end up creating a situation that we are in. Government should focus on sorting out the issue of stabilizing ESCOM, which they failed to do so far. They failed to provide a reliable transport system. They failed to build roads and maintain roads. They've given us an education system that encourages extraordinary low pass rate. Our education is so poor that we are unable to compete even to our fellow developing countries. We have a huge skills deficit as a result of the failures of the same ruling party. They failed to provide the infrastructure for our economy to grow, basic infrastructure for our developing economy, and more so for our mixed economy. South Africa should not be deceived into believing that this debate brought by the ANC is honest. They are not interested in building an inclusive economy. Their actions over the years have demonstrated so. What is needed to bring our country towards the path of success is to remove the ANC from the power. They've proven to us that they cannot clean up their own mess. As a result, South Africa currently ranks 82 in the ease of doing business ranking in comparison to our developing counterparts, and we are falling far behind. As the IFP, we have always believed that strong partnership between government and the private sector is what we need to build a strong economy and overall a prosperous country. This we cannot trust happens under the ANC-led government. This debate, Honorable Chair, is very important, and it's a matter that government should be pursuing, but we cannot be naive to believe that it will see a strong and inclusive mixed economy under the current leadership. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable F.J. Mulder.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair, members. For the economy to function at its best, it needs to be growing, sustainable and stable. But there is more to it. It's not simply that the economy should be merely growing, but it's growing for all people. It is not just creating stability for some people, but creating stability so that every person is free from worry about financial roadblocks and unforeseen issues. Therefore, for our economy to be thriving, it must be an inclusive economy. Over the past years, this inclusive modifier has become a significant area of focus. The economy should function for all people, and all people should have the financial freedom and mobility to pursue every opportunity they desire. True inclusion, as accomplished when all people are valued regardless of their background, are afforded every opportunity to fully participate as they should choose. This means the economy is not simply growing, but instead its production of goods and services is optimized to increase the prospects of opportunities for everyone. This also means that job opportunities and incomes are increased, and in doing so for every single segment of the economy. The Freedom Front Plus also believes that an inclusive economy is one of which our participation with business partners and communities is additive and not extractive. Honourable House Chair, we are facing a moral crisis in the South African economy. The single-minded pursuit of money fostered by a culture of self-interest and self-preservation ultimately isolated people and destroyed communities and accelerated inequality. Poverty persists and in many cases grows despite realized gains in productivity. Vulnerable groups also are excluded from jobs, schools, and opportunities they need to move up to, and this leaves them stuck in poverty for years and even for generations. House Chair, the term state capitalism was previously used to depict the communist regimes of the former Soviet Union, China, Cuba, and North Korea, and even today it also could be applied to the South African ANC government attempting to use state ownership to keep bankrupt parastatals in public hands. House Chair, since the ANC came into power in 1994, 20 years ago, South Africans have been exposed to cadre deployment, poor governance, state capture and corruption, virtually resulting in billions of rands to be lost and BBB and affirmative action only benefiting a few. Bankrupt parastatals such as Denel, the South African Post Office, Eskom, amongst others, virtually forced the South African economy to the verge of destruction. Under the post-1994 administration, the ANC government will only be remembered for its legacy of destruction, self-interest, and poverty. Only a realistic solution for a new, sustainable future and economic development lies in a new, responsible, broad-church, multi-party coalition government without the ANC, backed by the private sector to create a market-related free market economy where merit accounts. Thank you, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP welcomes this subject for discussion, as there can be no doubt that the economy needs to be built, grown significantly to address the rising poverty and unemployment levels and the poor state of our public finances. Structural challenges and weak economic growth have undermined progress in reducing poverty, with South Africa being one of the highest and having one of the highest persistent inequality rates in the world. Now, the economy is reeling as a result of various factors. Ongoing power outages and poor government policies and implementation are one of the aspects. It is reeling because of the poor public sector capacity and, as other speakers have alluded to, poorly performing SOEs, with Eskom being the prime example. It is reeling because of the inability of the state to perform its primary role, that of protecting its citizens from crime and violence, with ever-increasing numbers of criminal syndicates blatantly preying on individuals and businesses through extortion, as well as the steady stripping of much-needed infrastructure, such as the widespread theft of copper cables needed by Eskom, Transnet, and others. Where the ACDP and other parties differ from the majority parties in the solutions to the dire economic situation facing the country. In our view, the essence of the problem lies in the outdated ideology of the economy needing to be state-led. This requires far too many planners, and an excessive administration to make the system work, resulting in slow decision-making, corruption, and regression, technocratic of nature. It results in the state intervening, often to make things worse. We support the concept of a mixed economy where the public and private sectors work together. Ideally, a competent state and public service should provide the necessary environment for the private sector to thrive and create jobs and much needed state revenue. It is not one or the other, but both the private and public sectors working together. The private sector employs some 3/4 of South Africa's workers and accounts for over 2/3 of investment in research and development expenditure. Alongside a capable state, the country needs a thriving private sector that is investing in productive capacity. As private sector employment increases, more livelihoods are supported and sustained. Goods and services are delivered at a greater scale, and more revenue is collected for the state for infrastructure and social development. Such a mixed economy would ideally have a constructive relationship between the public and private spheres, not one or the other, for the betterment of all the citizens of South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is from the UDM, the ATM, Good, the AIC.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, the South African economy exists in a globalized economic order. This means we can no longer prescribe solutions in response to our economic realities without the pressures of the global world. In this regard, we have to move away from mere slogans, backward economic policies, and soundbite radical economic policies with no real traction to improving the lives of our people. Honorable members, national assets which are a burden to the fiscus can no longer be sustained under the pretext of some obscure nationalist policy. To achieve inclusive growth, we must involve the private sector in managing our failing SOEs. The process which will see our debt converted into equity and state-limited resources channeled to improving the lives of our poor instead of bailing out ailing SOEs. Honorable Chair, our debt to GDP ratio exceeds our spending priorities, and financing our debt interest has crowded our spending in health, in education, and in human settlements. The role of the state as the vanguard of socio-economic development can no longer be limited to its traditional role. The South African state must now be in touch with the leading international trends on economic policies and work alongside various private players to quantum leap its economic fortunes. Honorable Chair, while our state must lead all transformation processes, it must do so in tandem with the private sector, business, and labor, with the view of scaling up our renewed growth priorities. We must move with the times and adopt economic policies consistent with the pressures of the global order. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Mpiti.
What is disappointing about the ANC and the national government at large is that they have completely given up on the growth of South Africa's economy. We know this because they have failed to create an enabling environment for the economy to grow. The ANC has presided over the dismantling of South Africa's economy bit by bit to the detriment of South Africans. The ANC's economic growth plan will have you load shed at 9 a.m. in the morning while you are trying to offer a service or a product to a customer. It will have you come home to appliances which have been bought with your hard-earned money no longer working because they've burnt down during the time the electricity went off. It will have you paying taxes that never lead to improvement in your local governance because there will always be a cadre-infested failing SOE that needs to be bailed out. And not only that, that very same SOE will have unqualified people occupying positions further running down said SOE. It is the massive corruption in the very same ANC that stops basic service delivery in your community. It is that very same corruption that chases investors away from South Africa, killing job creation, with it the hopes of many young people. This has led to a stifling, rigid, regressive economic regulatory environment, which does little to distribute capital in an optimal manner. The truth is, the ANC is damaged. It's been damaged for a long time, and no, it is not going to miraculously renew itself. What it will do is to continue to drag all of us down with it. So in a debate that is about public-private sector involvement in inclusive growth, you can be sure to bet on the ANC to lead the way to economic decline and public sector degradation. In a debate around the state-led inclusive growth trajectory, you can be sure that you will be led to complete darkness, both figuratively and literally. The question that South Africans should be asking in this debate is, can we trust an ANC-led economic approach that has only showed us hardship? A government that has failed to respond to the crisis of youth unemployment in both word and deed. There is no love in this government for the people of South Africa, and where there is no love, there can be no courage. We are most certainly at a crisis point when graduates must turn to the street corners to source employment. With each passing day, young South Africans are receiving a raw deal from this government. The most basic consumer product relationship is that if something is not working for you, you need to change it. As the DA, we understand that an inclusive economy is possible when the public sector inspires confidence. This is why the DA believes that only through reducing red tape and more decentralized economic decision-making processes can we inspire growth, investment, more jobs, and therefore more taxes to be spent by government on growing equality of opportunity and providing strong safety nets for the vulnerable. A DA-led national government will embrace a role in the economy that creates an enabling environment and be a referee in ensuring open, competitive markets and protecting environment rather than a player. What this means for young people is more collaborations between government and the private sector. Initiatives like the employment tax incentive for businesses to fight youth unemployment while growing their businesses. The centralized ANC model has not worked for us. In fact, it is destroying all of our futures. I put forward this input to young people of South Africa. Try something new. With the lowest provincial unemployment rate in South Africa, the Western Cape government experiences the highest level of investor confidence in this country. We are indeed showing a new era is upon us. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. The Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members, ladies and gentlemen, a good day. Let me thank this opportunity I've been afforded to contribute on building a South Africa's mixed economy in both the public and the private sector, which needs to contribute to the new trajectory of inclusive growth to deal with the painful apartheid legacy exclusion of the majority of the people from the economy. In reversing the divisions of the South Africa's dual economies, which we must appreciate, into the transition of democracy in the mid-90s has been increasing. But due to the number of factors, progress has stagnated. Structural challenges, weak growth has undermined the progress in reducing poverty, which have been heightened by COVID-19 pandemic. The achievement of the progress in the household welfare is severely constrained by the rising unemployment, which reached unprecedented levels in the fourth quarter of 2021. South Africa, therefore, still remains a dual economy with one of the highest and persistent inequality rates in the world. The legacy of exclusion in the nature of our economy, it is not the pro-poor and does not generate sufficient jobs. So South Africa faces these challenges of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, and it is worsened by the level of underlying South African structure of our economy, continued spatial inequality, and the inequality of the development of human capital through education and health. The National Development Plan remains the only country's blueprint to address these challenges and ensure that Vision 2030 be made to deal with the more difficult COVID-19 crisis issues. So for this, government has taken and introduced the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan and the Presidential Economic Employment State Stimulus. The two initiatives are aimed at immediate responses to the severe economic impact of the pandemic and the triple challenges. The ERP puts its emphasis on aggressive infrastructure investment, gender equality and economic inclusion of women and youth, our green economy interventions, mass public employment interventions, and strengthening of the food security. The PEP has achieved about 62% of women and 84% of youth in creation of about 879,000 beneficiaries, which has been a remarkable progress achieved with about 23.6 billion that has been allocated, already circulated. 152,000 livelihoods were supported. For example, in the Free State, Ngwate Bulk Water was identified as one of the catalytic projects. The project is running and completing a 46-kilometer of water construction, and a total of about 21 subcontractors and SMMEs have been appointed and have concluded, are almost concluding the process. 5,776 household benefit. We say such of these programs are what are direct employment stimulus that comes from our processes. In identifying and strengthening the interventions to reverse and separate development, spatial planning apartheid regime system needs to be changed, and it needs to be appreciated that it is unequal and unevenly developing areas that are juxtaposed over the overcrowded townships and squalid informal settlement. Under the DA, with their success, we have Khayelitsha in the city of Cape Town. We have Kayamand in Stellenbosch. We have removed Wi-Fi for Black students in the city of Tshwane. In the city of Johannesburg, we have removed the public benefit organizations in the processing assessment rates, where even public schools pay exorbitant rates and taxes to the cities. These extreme spatial disparities is a legacy of racial separation, which is imposed particularly to the Africans, and it is reinforcing what was started earlier on. However, a range of factors are also responsible for this persistent unequal development. It indicates that undoing distortions of apartheid to reconfigure these spatial patterns will take considerable time. The NDP and its spatial development framework has put a process in place of ensuring that this expression, exploitation, disregard, and calculated underinvestment in areas where Africans reside needs to be dealt with. So in line with this framework, COGTA, for example, has adopted a small town regeneration strategies, which seeks to review 105 small municipalities to ensure that they are redeveloped, they are regenerated, they are accessible, they've got working job creation programs, and roll out to core government, social, and municipal services. We welcome again the Democratic Alliance to Nelson Mandela Bay. We promise that since 2016 to 2021, you did not build even a single RTP in your coalition of inconvenience. Inconvenience to the African people. A budget that was dedicated to you, not a cent was spent to that. There are no goals in this marriage of this morning. There's no vision, but only ganging against a development of what could change the lives of our people. But we will also be sitting, watching closely, as we are the only ones who are the hopes of the people of the Nelson Mandela Day. One of the key priorities in local sphere is attracting more investment.
Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, there is a member, the Honorable Kanya Teza from the EFF, whose microphone is on and it's disturbing.
Oh, sorry, Chair, it's on, it's off now.
Can you just switch it off, please? Thank you. Please proceed, Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I was saying in the maintenance of municipal infrastructure, even where other coalitions are failing, was stepping in ensuring that the municipal infrastructure accelerate the access to public goods and to marginalized citizens. In 2021, the municipal infrastructure grant was expanded to allow up to 5% of the allocation to develop the infrastructure asset management plans. And we take the step forward as MISA to ensure that we do business plans and assist municipalities to ensure the application to National Treasury is accompanied by the audited asset register. And we're moving into this space because we want to increase from land to the value of what the municipal books will end up allowing them, particularly in small towns and rural areas, to be on their own and change their economic status quo. For example, Gauteng government has created its own special framework, which puts into context that municipalities in a development act can now be able to lead the way in developing their economy, particularly in land that is not owned by anybody, but they can also be able to introduce fines and penalties on vacant, undeveloped land owned by any private individuals, including the state, in areas identified that could be able to make socio-economic integration and isolation in areas where our people are staying. There are people who sit with pockets of land undeveloped, unutilized, but do not want to release it to the benefit of the people to live with that and promote that. In conclusion, Chair, the address with regards to the district development model tells us that we need to have a capable and efficient and ethical state. Listen to who was telling us about cadre development and cadre deployment today, the Democratic Alliance. Let me refresh their memory. Marietta Steenkamp, 16 May 2018, City of Tshwane, not qualified. Wow, was that enough? 2019, Previn Gaivinda falsified his qualification of a fire official in 2019. De Villiers, a bodybuilder in the city of Ekurhuleni, fired previously from the city of Tshwane, but currently was employed by the mayor. Then who is violating the implementation framework towards the professionalization of public service with the aim to build a state that only services them and services people who are not many and in majority in those areas who are locked in townships? Kabachalona, Leadipata, Sabangwe, Leadipepit, Yalewo.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. I now recognize COPE, the PAC, Al-Jamaa, the Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Honorable Hendricks. Please continue.
South Africa, like many states around the globe, is a country that had a mixed economy. It partakes in a free market economy as opposed to a centrally controlled one. Worded differently, one reflects on an economy that is essentially a mixture between a first world and a third world economy, and this is for several reasons. This mixture contains a component that defines economic status in pure socioeconomic terms. Considering these, one may argue that South Africa continued to have a mixed economy despite the fact that it continues to own state entities such as Sasol and ISCO, entities that unfortunately been sold off to the private sector, and this has been with no tangible financial return to the public. In fact, it is the latter that supported financially for several years with the purpose of transforming South Africa's commercial sector into a viable, independent one. This sadly, Honorable House Chair, did not happen. For the record, while ISCO has been stripped of its assets, Sasol was conveniently privatized, and these all took place in whose interest? So Sasol's new shareholders have continued to reap financial benefits of an inflated crude oil price, and its original investors paid record prices for fuel. Now the state-owned enterprises such as Eskom, Armscor, and SAA that are strategic assets have been regrettably mismanaged, and its funds squandered without those in charge thinking of their knock-on effects. They have all not only become a burden to the nation because of incompetent appointees, but they have forced our nation into further debt, becoming a begging bowl nation. At this point, these developments should be halted by appointing competent persons that possess the relevant skills. Importantly, too, is the fact that these entities should have empowered our disadvantaged communities, but seems not to have been the case as expected. Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Hendricks. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah. For the first 15 years of democracy, South Africa enjoyed the advantages of both effective institutions and a shared willingness of stakeholders who believed in the power of cooperation. This enabled the country to move beyond counterproductive conflict and pursue win-win outcomes. Growth began to accelerate, which created new opportunities for expanding the middle class. Increased fiscal space made it possible to broaden access to public services and to social grants, which reduced absolute poverty. There were, however, and there is some stark limitations in what was achieved. Gains for the poorest did little to alter the difficult economic and social realities. Now, having said that, the National Freedom Party supports wholeheartedly a mixed economy. It is not only the responsibility of government to create jobs, but also the private sector, and more importantly, the private sector. But I think government's responsibility is to create a conducive environment. One of the setbacks, Chairperson, appears to be the BEE, because it seems to have created something like 17,500 black millionaires and multi-millionaires in the country who have done very little to boost the economy. Now, very importantly, if we want economic growth in a mixed economy, we must create that environment. If you look at the Chairperson, the cost of doing business, particularly for small business, and the red tape that exists, makes it very, very difficult for them to survive. Then you have the serious problem of imports into the country, which makes it very difficult for local manufacturers to compete. And as we know that we had some of the most vibrant industries in South Africa, particularly the manufacturing sector of leather, textiles, plastic. You know, at one stage, Chairperson, during the days of apartheid, because of sanctions, almost everything was made and manufactured in South Africa, including motor vehicles. Now, why are we not going back to that with such a high level of unemployment in the country? You know, Chairperson, yesterday, National Treasury actually highlighted the problems that we're having at local government level, particularly in the high levels of corruption. And she said in no uncertain terms that it is political interference. Politicians want to decide who the municipal managers is. They want to decide who the directors, the CEO, for what must be done and what must not be done. And that is why the NFP believes you can do a lot more at local level if you separate that administration from politics as a whole. Now, if you look at the issue, you know, we talk about the high unemployment rate in the country. Look at the number of vacancies, Chairperson, in every department in this country. But yet look at the high levels of people unemployed in this country. What is the reason for that? Because the quality of education has now decreased. It is not the quality that we used to. That is why you find, Chairperson, 60% of those, and if we're spending 12 billion, it means 7 billion is being thrown away. They drop out in the first year alone. What is it doing? We have a massive shortage in this country. We don't have barbers, no hairdressers that are local, no tailors that are local. You want an electrician, he's a foreigner. You want a plumber, he's a foreigner. You want a carpenter, he's a foreigner. So the opportunities are there, and I think we need to create that conducive environment so that we'd be able to take South Africa forward through a mixed economy. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. This ANC-led government is wholly incapable of driving inclusive growth and prosperity. Testament to this is the fact that the highest unemployment rate in the world can be found right here in South Africa, that millions of South Africans' stomachs are aching with hunger, and that 65% of young South Africans are sitting without a job and without hope. In this last week, as South Africans, we have had to endure stage 6 rolling blackouts. Your state-owned power utility, Eskom, is incapable of meeting our country's basic energy needs. throttling the very existence out of business and the economy. And yet today we stand here to debate that your government should lead growth. This statement is absurd. Government needs to unbundle Eskom and create a favorable regulatory framework for independent power producers to operate in. The swift transition to renewables and a greener economy will lend towards a stable electricity supply, quality jobs, and economic growth. Almost every state-owned entity is bankrupt, fraught with corruption, and utilized as a personal piggy bank for politicians and their patronage networks. Your state-led attempts at growth are having the exact opposite effect. They are destroying our country. Economic growth should and must be private sector-led. The role of government then is to enable an environment for this growth through functioning infrastructure, policing, health, and marketing SA as a desirable destination for foreign investment by displaying policy stability. Government's interference in the tourism sector through illogical and job-killing regulations saw thousands of businesses close and tourism hotspots becoming ghost towns during the various phases of COVID-19 lockdown. How long it will take the sector to recover, it's unknown. What is known, though, is that there are thousands of people without jobs. Instead of telling people that they couldn't go on to the beach, but that they could be packed like sardines into malls during lockdown, what this government should have been doing is ensuring that our municipalities work. In Durban, which is just one sorry example, infrastructure collapse has resulted in beaches, rivers, and harbors teeming with sewage, killing our tourism economy. Government should be focused on ensuring that it can deliver basic services so that the private sector can grow and create jobs. Internationally, South Africa, in terms of travel destinations, has become a pariah because of our reputation as a violent country. What this government should be focusing on is protecting our communities and our businesses. The DA has called for policing to be devolved to provinces to fight crime more effectively. The DA's LEAP program in Cape Town, which has seen a decline in crime, is a case in point. Government is failing in its very core mandate and yet still wants to argue that it can lead economic growth. This corrupt and dysfunctional state is incapable of leading anything. Move out the way and let the private sector lead. Your economic overreach, botched SOEs, and triple BEE patronage
Honourable
networks
Member, your
have
time is
unveiled that
now
the ANC is
expired.
nothing more
Thank you.
hypocrisy masquerading as government for the people.
Honourable Member, your time is expired. Thank you. I now call upon the Honourable Magaxa to close this debate. The Honourable Magaxa.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chairperson, development is the root cause of South Africa's socio-economic challenges has become widespread. While free market ideologues like the DA and Freedom Plan Plus firmly believe that market freedom and private property rights could do better than state-led development in relation to economic transformation, inclusive economic development, the ANC is convinced that such a virulent view is rather simplistic, not only because this view comes from a position of privilege, but also because its intention is to perpetuate a colonial stereotype mentality that seeks to entrench the formal colonized people into white mythologies. Let me just go straight to the this DA and EFF plus. They must appreciate that what brought them here in this parliament of democracy post-1994 is about protecting the wealth and property which they have accumulated in the most inhumane corruption ever happened under the sun. That's what they must understand. They are here in order to protect that. They've got a very limited and narrow role in this democratic organization, which is merely about that. It is because of our love for peace and coexistence that still we allow them to own these huge pieces of land, this massive accumulation and loot, while we know for a fact that it is the product of theft. They will always have to jump to use challenges of our transformation as weapons to rubbish all attempts to resolve contradictions created by colonialism of a special type. corruption is their number one weapon, nothing else, while they know that they are the first and the worst extreme corruptors ever under the sun. By the way, they forget that in each and every official or bureaucrat arrested for corruption, behind them is a white, who is particularly their member or their former member who is behind that corruption. They don't understand that. We saw that. By the way, the Freedom Front Plus is an extremist from the DA. It's like Conservative Party to National Party. Those are just extremists. They believe that the DA is not protecting their farms enough. They think that perhaps we can take their farm beyond the DA. Therefore, they think that they can do better. Another extreme opponent is the EFF.
Honorable Magaxa, there is the Honorable Violet Suwela, whose microphone is on. Honorable Suwela, can you switch off your microphone? You are disturbing the debate. If the member cannot switch off the microphone, I will ask the IT to close the microphone of that honorable member. Please proceed, Honorable Magaxa.
By the way, Chair, both EFF and EFF Plus are two sides of the same coin. Those are the extremists, not the radicals. They are extremists. Their role is to shout loudly. In fact, they shout them in an extreme form. But that's why in most of the time, they have to agree on most.
What has it
That's
done
why I
here?
was not surprised when one of the EFF speakers talk about removing ANC from the power. And that's exactly what the EFF Plus would love to achieve. Then the EFF, I think it's important for them to understand that
Let's do away with
the more
gradualism.
you move towards left, the more you move to the extreme of left, you become an extreme right winger.
Focus on your camera, man. Focus on your camera.
Honorable members, I spelled out very clearly the rules in terms of this virtual plenary, and you know what the rules are. While there is interjections that is allowed, please do so in an orderly manner. In an orderly manner. If you want to raise a point of order, put up your hand and you'll be recognized. Please conclude now, Honorable Magaxa.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important for the parties to consider identifying different places of recruiting their membership. Recruiting from Shibin and hotels and Slave Queen is not always helping, especially if one talk about parliament. It's not viable for places of deploying such as parliament. Perhaps you can deploy those people somewhere else. Parliament is supposed to appreciate this as a platform where we express the views of society for the society, not to bring the most discredited people from the society to this platform. Hence, I'm not surprised when the EFF.
Honorable member, your time has now expired. Thank you.
Please give him 2 minutes extra, please.
Honorable Chabalala, you were also not recognized. Don't do the same wrong that other members are doing. It's not very clever. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. We shall now proceed to the second item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honorable B S Masango on the solutions to address the worsening cost of living crisis in the Republic. I will now recognize the Honorable Masango from the virtual platform. The Honorable Masango.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The 81% of households cutting down on at least one meal a day and 41% having no means to feed their families are people. They are South Africans. They are men, women, and children. Not so long ago, many of them had jobs through which they were earning a living to take care of their families. All that went up in smoke when COVID hit, causing unemployment to soar. When violent and devastating riots took place in July last year, causing lives and affecting thousands of formal and informal businesses. And when floods wreaked havoc in KZN and the Eastern Cape, with so many of those families still reliant on mass relief shelters, this put extra strain on their finances as they have to travel further to work and school, adding to their already high cost of living. The high cost of food affects the quality of daily meals. In South Africa, 27% of children suffer from stunting, which is, I quote, the failure of children to reach their full growth potential as a result of long-term poor diet, health, and/or care, close quote. This definition could have easily been conceptualized for the South African strain of child stunting, the lack of care for especially children that has been displayed by the ANC government in the recent history is astounding. Where else have you seen ministers taken to court in order to provide starving children and families with meals? The National School Nutrition Program case comes to mind, where millions of children were suddenly without food at a time when their caregivers had no means to fend for them. Is this how we care for the day-to-day nutritional needs of vulnerable children? No, it cannot be. It is important to note that the Democratic Alliance was involved in all these court actions because we will stop at nothing to ensure that poor and vulnerable are cared for in real terms. Unlike the ANC government, we do not make empty promises. They speak one thing and do or doesn't do the exact opposite. As champions of the whole of society approach to South Africa's many problems, man-made and otherwise, the DA has continued to come up with well-researched, realistically crafted, and time-sensitive interventionist solutions to the hardships so many are experiencing. We not only propose these from research, but we are implementing some of them in our governments, in our DA governments. We do hope President Ramaphosa, to whom the DA leader John Steenhuisen presented these interventions a couple of weeks ago, will put South Africans first and implement them. In short, these solutions are cutting taxes and levies on fuel to reduce the cost of transporting food, reallocating the 50 million food aid to Cuba to feed hungry people right here at home, scrapping VAT on the food items most commonly purchased by the poorest households by reviewing and expanding the zero-rated food basket, reviewing and reducing import tariffs on food consumed by low-income households, providing private title to all land reform beneficiaries to increase food supply and security while reducing prices. As the Democratic Alliance, we have and continue to demonstrate that caring is a doing word, not a slogan to try and win votes. In the DA-run Western Cape, we are implementing the following. Almost 500,000 school children are fed daily by the Western Cape Education Department. In addition, 25,000 children are fed by the Western Cape Education Department through after-school and youth development programs. The Western Cape Education Department also helped establish 571 food gardens. The Western Cape Department of Social Development feeds 158,770 young children through ECD centers. As a caring organization, we will not tire in proposing implementable solutions to save lives and livelihoods of the people of this nation. The recent increase in food prices has reduced the value of grants that are way below the lower bound poverty line to levels where households depending on these grants are left with very little to live on. According to the Household Affordability Index by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, an average food basket costs 4,776 Rand this year, compared to last year's 4,241 Rands. That is a creative and constructive initiative that needs to be developed. This is why the DA is proposing leveraging the potential of communities to plant their own vegetable gardens to feed their families. Many of these initiatives are already thriving and form the backbone of not only survival, but also healthy living for many households. It is a shame, Chairperson, that millions of South Africans are facing starvation and hunger every single day, the very human rights enshrined in the Constitution of this nation. This while the government of the ANC did this. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, the Honorable Majola.
Chairperson, honorable members, fellow South Africans. An American author and televangelist, Robert Harold Schuller, once said, "Tough times never last, but tough people do." As a country and its people, we are indeed faced with one of the toughest of times. Whilst many countries suffered significant setbacks in their economies as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures that were put in place to curb the spread thereof, as South Africa, we had to contend with other setbacks that have caused much of the socioeconomic suffering. Two of our most significant provinces were unexpectedly hit by violent unrest and looting of goods in July 2021. A number of jobs were lost as a result of unrest, adding to the significant numbers of jobs lost as a result of COVID-19. As we began the year 2022, hopeful of accelerating implementation of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, whose key element is creating jobs, some parts of KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape experienced unprecedented flooding that resulted in enormous loss of livelihoods. The economic impact of the floods is severe and has caused damage to many businesses, infrastructure, and households, resulting in job losses. Honorable members, the South African economy was already in a weak position when it entered the pandemic after a decade of low growth. Following the pandemic-induced contraction of 6.4% in 2020, the South African economy started to recover in 2021, with GDP growth reaching 4.9%. This growth was supported by favorable global demand and commodity prices, as well as the rebound in domestic economic activities from the 2020 recession. However, the recovery has not been very strong in terms of new jobs thus far, with nearly 1.9 million people less employed at the end of 2021, compared with the quarter before the pandemic struck. This has begun to change, albeit too slowly, with Statistics South Africa reporting that 648,000 jobs were created in Q2 of 2022 compared to Q1 of the same year. At the back of these challenges we are facing is the ongoing Eastern European war in Ukraine. It should be noted that the main underlying drive of inflation in South Africa is external, namely the increase in fuel and food prices due to the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian war has brought much of the global economy into a tailspin, with inflation forecasts painting a very bad picture. The European economy's overall growth forecast stands at 2.7% and overall inflation at 6.8%. The United Kingdom's inflation expected to reach 10% in October this year. Germany has an inflation forecast standing at 6.5%, the largest since the unification of Germany in the early 90s. Portugal and Ireland are also facing an inflation above 5%. The European Commission Bank is considering further interest rates increases. Even the US economy, while it is doing well on the rise of unemployment after COVID-19 supported by government stimulus measures, is currently facing inflation of 8.5%. The cost of living in the Eurozone is the cause of mass protests seen in London and other capitals. These economic spirals have a halo effect to our own South African economy, as this is our major trading market. Not only did oil and gas prices shoot up sharply following the invasion, agricultural crops such as wheat also felt the impact. This is all due to the Ukraine being the 6th largest exporter of wheat in the world. With the war in Ukraine, wheat production and exports from Ukraine has dropped significantly. The subdued economic environment and loss of jobs since COVID-19 struck 2 years has become a source of grave concern to government. South Africans have been facing record high food and fuel prices throughout of this year. A record survey from debt rescue firms found that as a result of the high inflationary market, as many as 81% of respondents are cutting down on daily meals as they can no longer afford them. Globally, the rising energy prices are accelerating the cost of living crisis. These prices have had immediate and devastating effects on household welfare. This has created a vicious cycle of supply and price instability and made the lives of the most vulnerable even more precarious. And we had to act with speed to respond to this crisis. There was an announcement of temporary measures to reduce the general fuel levy, as well as additional measures to reduce basic fuel price and to introduce the price cap for 93 ULP to promote competition and reduce prices. As government, we will continue working with the private sector through social compacting to find solutions to our challenges. The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan sets out regulatory reforms as part of addressing the high cost of living. The implementation of the agreed reforms is expected to add productivity gains with a greater likelihood of lowering prices, such as electricity reforms. And this will in turn have a further and much greater impact on the GDP and employment growth. In terms of current relief for South Africans, according to the Department of Social Development, almost half of all people rely on some form of financial support from the government. The department recorded in May of this year that the extension of the COVID-19 social relief of distress grant has taken the percentage of people who rely on social transfers up to roughly 47%. While we cannot as yet substitute oil imports, we can most certainly encourage our farmers to plant more wheat and thereby reduce South Africa's vulnerability to global wheat prices. It is these economic opportunities that, in the context of the country's persistent triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, we dare not miss. The importance of localization and reindustrialization through leveraging of the country's comparative and competitive advantages can therefore not be overemphasized. We must work together to increase jobs. In this regard, the digital economy provides endless possibilities with a bright and exciting future. The major question is, how can South Africa take advantage of the opportunities in the digital economy? Through the reimagined industrial strategy, we aim to open opportunities for young people to develop new software and applications, devices, and equipment through specialized startup support programs for use by all spheres of government and society. The South African government understands the importance of growing entrepreneurial activity and SMMEs, and thus the township economy, and continues to invest significantly in incentives and funds for doing so. There is an urgent need for strategic and sustainable responses to the challenge of high cost of living. Some of the policy approaches could include improving the tax system and reducing spending inefficiencies that would put public finances on a more sustainable path, while taking action to revive productivity growth that will help to revive GDP growth and raise living standards. strengthening public finances, creating a more growth-friendly tax system, and fostering higher productivity through enhanced infrastructure and more reliable power. Honorable members, time for political posturing to gain political mileage will not move our country forward. Instead, we need to work together to better the lives of our people. It is during these tough times that we need national consensus in order to reset our economy and take the country back to the upward trajectory. I have no doubt that the path we are taking is responding to the economic challenges, and we will see the country back to the economic trajectory that we seek. This will ultimately reduce the high cost of living and for the benefit of all South Africans. House Chairperson, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. I now call upon the Honorable Cuthbert.
Honorable House Chairperson, South Africa finds itself in a very dark place at the moment. Our economy has been ravaged by years of state-sponsored corruption, ideological rigidity, and administrative ineptitude. Despite advances in human development during the 90s and early 2000s through the introduction of a social housing, an expanded welfare system, and a more equitable distribution of public services, the gains made have largely been eroded. Social housing has become a trough for tenderpreneurs. We have too few people in jobs and too many reliant on the welfare system, and our public services, which have failed to be expanded and maintained, are on the verge of total collapse. But honorable members, that is not all. We are currently engaged in a serious fight against stubbornly high inflation brought about by the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, as well as poor domestic policy choices such as localization. While the governing party was clinking glasses at Russian soirees in May, DA leader John Steenhuisen was on the ground in Ukraine, warning of the devastation that was on its way. The DA was ridiculed by the opposition benches and the commentariat for being out of touch, and the trip was labeled a PR disaster. Leading that particular charge was Maven of the Fourth Estate, Quinita Hunter. Once again, the DA was right and you were all wrong. Closer to home, the DA warned government about the disastrous effects of localization and the impact it would have on prices, competition, and trading relationships. Yet government forged ahead using tariffs, local procurement regulations, and state funding to protect big business at the expense of the consumer. However, they eventually came around to our view when they were forced to do a U-turn on poultry tariffs, which would have seen millions more have to forego this basic source of protein. We have also seen how this has affected our trading relationships, with major trading partners having retaliated by blocking South African imports into their countries. Did the ANC really think that there would be no consequences for their actions? The grinding poverty South Africans find themselves in is as a result of this. If the governing benches are not already aware, let me provide them with a quick refresher. 81% of households are skipping at least one meal daily, and 41% say they can't feed their families anymore. Childhood stunting affects 27% of children under the age of 5, and 34% of South Africans find themselves without work, and if they're lucky enough to have a job, it takes a mere 5 days for them to spend up to 80% of their monthly salaries. Thus far, government has been caught flat-footed in addressing this crisis. Instead, it has relied on the South African Reserve Bank to tame inflation with a series of rate hikes. However, as we know, monetary policy can only do so much. This is why we as the DA are demanding that government implements the following measures. 1, cut fuel taxes and levies to decrease the cost of transporting food. 2, reallocate the 50 million rand food aid for Cuba to feed hungry people at home. 3, scrap VAT on the food items most commonly purchased by the poorest households by reviewing and expanding the zero-rated foods baskets. 4, review and reduce import tariffs on foods consumed by low-income households. And 5, provide private title to all land reform beneficiaries to increase food supply and security while reducing prices. Failure to address the ongoing cost of living crisis will have dire consequences for social stability. If you thought that the July 2021 unrest wreaked untold havoc, wait until those who have been trampled on by government decide to rise up. Most recently, we've seen what has happened in Sri Lanka, and before that amongst our African peers. This is not a bear that anyone wants you to poke. Just think of the infrastructure damage, business closure, job losses, skills flight, and interrupted service delivery this could cause. Some may argue this is fear-mongering, but it is not. This is a warning to those in power that they would
Honorable
do well
Cuthbert.
to heed. Yes.
Honorable Cuthbert, my apologies to interrupt you. The sound of the Honorable Linda Moss is on. Honorable member, please disconnect your sound. And if you cannot, then I'll ask the IT people to disconnect you. Please continue, Honorable Cuthbert.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Rather allow a DA-led coalition to replace you via the ballot box in 2024 so that we can begin to rescue our country. South Africans deserve a better government. It is, however, up to them to make that change. So let us come together, support the DA's proposals to address the cost of living crisis, and help elect a government that cares about you and your family's well-being. I thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is from the EFF.
Thanks, House Chairperson. House Chairperson, the truth of the matter is that the majority of our people, particularly Black Africans, have been living with a worse cost of living for a very long time. Most working class families have a lot of debt and have trouble paying for basic things. The most reliable form of transport for workers has completely collapsed because there are no reliable trains. Workers are now spending more than 10% of their income on public transport. Those who have no choice but to drive their own cars must spend more than 25 rand per litre on petrol, in addition to expensive maintenance. The price of food has left many working class and poor families compromised, faced with empty plates and going to bed on empty stomachs. The price of cooking oil has now increased by 70% in the last 12 months. The price of a food basket for a household has now increased to a well over 4,500, and based on the annual consumer price inflation released yesterday by Statistics South Africa that decreased by 0.2%, the price of a food basket is likely to remain over 4,500. House Chairperson, fewer adults are now employed in many working class households, and many of those who are not working are young people who should be transitioning to adulthood, independent and contributing meaningfully and productively to the economy. The total number of people who are unemployed has now increased to 7.9 million, of which the majority are youth. South Africa is one of the many few countries where workers continue to experience a fall in real wages while the cost of living continues to increase and the number of dependents in households increases. Between 2016 and 2021, the real income for many workers decreased by more than 20%. To make matters worse, Eskom plans to apply for a 32% tariff for electricity that they are failing to supply. What is to be done? Number one, we must do away with the inflation targeting monetary policy by the Reserve Bank. We have enough evidence to show that we need a monetary policy that must take into account job creation and the allocation of credit to productive sectors. Number two, we must do away with senseless interest hikes. The obsession with interest hikes that we have witnessed in the past few months is self-inflicted policy mismanagement. The National Treasury succumbed to international financial pressure and lowered the requirement of our pensions and insurance that must be kept in the country from 70% to 50%. At the same time, what we have seen since February this year has been a drastic increase in capital outflow. And at the same time, nothing is being done to deal with illicit financial flows. The Reserve Bank is busy chasing foreign capital by raising interest rates while slowing down a productive economy and causing an unnecessary debt crisis. Many working class households will not recover from the debt crisis they are being pushed into. Many are going to lose their houses, their cars, and will be left with debts that they will never recover from. And while all this is happening, they will not be able even to afford bread, maize, vegetables, electricity, transport, and other essentials they need to survive. I thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Majosi from the IFP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Madiba once said, and I quote, "Freedom is meaningless if you cannot put food in their stomachs," I close quote. During a recent TV interview, the traditional Prime Minister to the Zulu Nation monarch and IFP founder, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, reflected on the South Africa we live in today. Having dedicated his life to the service of our people and having been part of the dream and struggle for a free and democratic South Africa, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi spoke about his pain at the current state of the nation. He said it caused him deep distress that due to mismanagement and corruption, South Africa has been reduced to a welfare state with little to no opportunity for the youth of this country. His sentiments are supported by the facts. South Africa currently faces a number of different crises: unemployment, equality crisis, poverty and electricity crisis, as well as water, sewage, crime, and public healthcare crisis. South Africa is, in many respects, going backwards, and this should give us sleepless nights. Let me share some key indicators. Real GDP per capita has been shrinking consistently, and by 2020 on average, South Africans were 10% poorer than they've been in 2014. 18.3 million people now live below the poverty line, and according to Statistics South Africa, the official unemployment rate was 33.9 in the second quarter of 2022. Malnutrition is common. The cost of food crisis in South Africa is exacting a heavy toll on millions of poor South Africans. A recent survey indicated that 81% of South Africans are cutting down on daily meals due to high food prices, while 41% say their monthly grocery budget can no longer feed their families. As people get poorer and unemployment grows, people get more desperate, and we see an increase in crime, vandalism, looting, and other criminal activities. Surely this is not the South Africa we as leaders of the society had hoped to build for future generations. The IFP proposes the following interventions. As early as 2018, the IFP has been calling on government to cut fuel taxes and levies to lower the cost of transport. This cannot only be a temporary measure. If we lower people's transport costs, they can allocate more household budget towards food, as well as lowering the input cost for food producers. We must stem the endless flow of corruption and waste. In August 2022, the Auditor General of South Africa revealed that 41 national departments incurred 1.5 billion fruitless and wasteful expenditure over the past 5 years. This is unacceptable. Those who have stolen from the state must be prosecuted and funds must be returned to the fiscals. We must review and expand the list of zero-rated food to include more items commonly purchased by the poorest 50% of the household, with charges to be implemented with MTBPS. Government must look to the IFP's model of self-help and self-reliance and provide the skills, resources, and to allow communities to help themselves. We must prioritize skills development, bursaries, resources, and training and support for subsistence farmers, developing cooperatives and emerging farmers. We must empower traditional leaders to support their communities by supporting and resourcing Amakosi to execute their functions. In 2014, it is the duty of each citizen to ensure they elect ethical, caring servant leaders who will prioritize the people of South Africa rather than their own self-agendas. The IFP thanks Honorable Masango for tabling this important debate and pledges its support towards safeguarding the rights of the poorest and most vulnerable in our society. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Briet.
Thank you, House Chair. Before getting to the solutions to address the worsening cost of living in the country, one needs to look at how bad the current state of affairs really is. And let me tell you, it is dire. According to Stats SA, youth unemployment in South Africa is at 66.5%. Even the president in his weekly blog says, no society can expect to grow or thrive when the vast majority of its young people are out of work. Another prominent aspect of South Africa's poverty is related to extreme income inequality. The country has the highest income Gini index globally at 63%. As of 2022, around 18.2 million people in South Africa lived in extreme poverty, with a poverty threshold at $1.9 per day. Over 123,000 people were pushed into poverty in comparison to 2021. The headcount was forecast to increase by the coming years. By 2025, around 18.5 million South Africans are projected to be living on a maximum of $1.9 per day. Wanneer by produkpryse kom, vergeleke met Augustus verlede jaar, het sonneblomolie insluitend canolaolie met 55% gestyg, die hoogste styging van produkte jaar tot jaar. Die tweede hoogste jaar tot jaar prysstyging vir 'n voedselproduk is vir beet, wat 40,5% duurder is. Koekmeel het onder voedselprodukte die derde hoogste styging getoon, 30,8%, gevolg deur komkommer en geblikte bone, albei met stygings van 23%. An ongoing investigation by the Competition Commission found a staggering increase in the wholesale price of tomatoes. The average price of tomatoes increased from R5.95 per kilogram in May 22 to R12.48 per kilogram in July, a spike of 109% in 2 months. Ons kan verder gaan en praat oor skoonmaakmiddels wat met 23,4% jaar tot jaar gestyg het, of selfs brandstofpryse wat jaar tot jaar met 56,2% gestyg het. Taxi fares are currently consuming more than 1/3 of minimum wage workers' salaries. Die kort en lank daarvan is dat ons in die moeilikheid is, diep in die moeilikheid. 3 uit die afgelope 5 jare het salarisse nie eers met inflasie gegroei nie, om nie eers van produkinflasie te praat nie. 2 van die eksterne bydraende faktore hiertoe is die huidige droogte in Europa en China, as ook die Oekraïne-Rusland krisis. Die 3 grootste bydraende faktore intern is natuurlik ons voortsleepende beerdkragkrisis, die astronomiese brandstofpryse, as ook ons hoë werkloosheidskoers. Aan interne faktore kan ons nie juis iets doen nie, behalwe om te verseker dat ons 'n netto-uitvoerder en nie 'n netto-invoerder van produk is nie. Ons gaan slegs 'n netto-uitvoerder van produk raak as die regering besef dat die rede hoekom landbou die tweede grootste groeiende industrie in Suid-Afrika is as gevolg van ons kommersiële landbouers en hul dienooreenkomstig begin ondersteun. Met interne faktore wat voor die hand liggend is die oplossing net so voor die hand liggend. Dis ekonomie 101. Die enigste manier om inflasie te mitigeer is om ekonomiese groei te hê. Om ekonomiese groei te hê is om werkskepping van kardinale belang. Hoe verhoog jy werkskepping? Jy stel 'n klimaat daar wat gunstig is vir nie net entrepreneurs nie, maar vir indiensneming van mense. Verder is dit nodig om onnodige brandstofpremies wat nie gebruik word vir die doel waarvoor dit daar gestel is nie af te skaf, om brandstof meer bekostigbaar te maak en sodoende vervoerkoste ook te verlaag. Ook moet daar daadwerklik opgetree word om die kragkrisis aan te spreek. In steede daarvan dat Eskom inwoners en maatskappye wat hulle wil help met energieopwekking te beboet, moet hulle beloon word. Die oplossing is dus eenvoudig. In die kort termyn moet die ANC van sy belaglike beleidsrigtings ontslaa raak en in die lang termyn moet ons van die ANC in sy geheel ontslaa raak en 'n regering daarstel wat outomaties Suid-Afrikaners eerste stel. Ek dank u.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable KRJ Meshu, as I also invite the Honourable Soma to preside over the remainder of this mini-plenary session. The Honourable Meshu.
House Chairperson, among other factors, our worsening cost of living crisis is largely caused by poor service delivery. Vulnerable South Africans suffer every time the lights go out. According to a recent survey, load shedding has caused 60% of us in terms of at least one damaged appliance, while 50% have lost the contents of their fridge at least once. 55% have bought gas stoves, and many others have had to acquire generators, inverters, or solar power devices, all this because of constant load shedding. With a 45% increase in diesel and food prices rising monthly, we are in serious trouble as a nation. We have been weakened to the tune of 1.5 trillion rands by state capture, 50 billion rands by last year's riots, and now we are being paralyzed by stage 5 and 6 load shedding. 1/10 of our people go hungry every day, over 1/4 of our children are stunted, and 40% of deaths are caused by lifestyle diseases that are the result of malnutrition, like stroke, heart disease, and some cancers. Practical solutions to food insecurity is the immediate need we have. The ACDP agrees with Professor Gioste of the National Agricultural Marketing Council, who has proposed that we should consider food stamp system that is used in the United States of America and increase the number of food banks which donate unsold food that has passed its sell-by date to the needy. Furthermore, the ACDP proposes that we copy cities in Brazil, which are creating huge urban vegetable projects. For example, they have a 27-acre garden that feeds about 50,000 families. We should use innovative methods such as hydroponics, which saves on space and does not require soil. The city of Rio, for example, has a vegetable project for residents of its massive informal settlement. This has proved very successful because the residents are enabled to farm small strips of land in huge urban vegetable gardens by being provided with seeds, tools, and monthly stipend. Long-term, however, reducing our cost of living requires sound and accountable financial management from the presidency down to local government. According to debt counselors, South Africans spend an average of 63% of their take-home pay on servicing their debts. Since 2016, most salary earners have lost a third of their purchasing power, and many have clearly reached out to legal and illegal machonistas for help, and interest rates have become another expensive item on their overloaded monthly budget. Government needs to protect vulnerable consumers from unethical moneylenders by enforcing the National Credit Act and by creating a culture of saving in the nation. In conclusion, petrol price increases also keep our poor hungry. Every time petrol goes up,
Thank you so
goods
much.
and services become more expensive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, House Chair Floric. Now, honorable members, we shall recognize the UDM. UDM, we shall proceed to ATM. Good. With that, honorable members, we shall recognize Honorable I.S. Sihlolo of the DA. Honorable Sihlolo.
Chairperson, thank you very much indeed. Honorable Chair, on the 3rd of November 2020, this House met to debate, as a matter of national importance, the economic impact on the lives of the most vulnerable and poor commuters due to the ongoing damage to public rail infrastructure. The DA's position during that debate was perfectly clear, and it applies to this debate here today. And that is, the ANC is to blame for the collapse in the country's transport system and is contributing directly to the high cost of living for all South Africans. It was you, Minister Mbalula, who decided to leave our rail system unprotected. And it was you, Mr. President, who allowed the minister to be this irresponsible. Perhaps let us put this into context. Many residents of KwaNdebele in Mpumalanga who use the R57 road, Moloto Road, are domestic workers and by implication women, some of whom are elderly. A monthly PATCO bus ticket from KwaNdebele to Pretoria is estimated at around 1,200 rands, which equals between 20 to 21 trips. As far as the minimum wage is concerned, these mothers, grandmothers, and aunts earn around 3,300 per month. After travel costs, they are left with 2,100. We have not even calculated the amount they spend on feeder taxis to actually get to work. Essentially, the people of KwaNdebele, like millions others across the country, work hand to mouth. The little they earn goes towards transport and food, but is left may very well not be enough to cover the basic food basket if you consider that these families are sometimes 4 to 5 people. How are they meant to afford other essentials such as school fees, school uniforms, clothing, etc.? The reality is that these fellow South Africans are forced to resort to creating unsustainable debt with informal tuck shops that they cannot afford to pay back in full every month simply because they need to feed their families. It is a fact that trains are far cheaper mode of transport. But with the lies that have been told by government regarding the Moloto rail corridor, is it then any wonder why the people of KwaNdebele only work towards food and transport? All this due to the ANC government's inability to get things done. Honorable Chairperson, I'm further reminded of a story narrated to me by Honorable Chris Hunsinger of a lady called Miriam. She lives next to the destroyed Netrecht station on the Central Line in Cape Town and works at the Pick and Pay in the V&A. Her cost of transport was 40% more compared to when trains were available. At the time, which was January 2022, taxi prices had already increased twice. One cannot begin to imagine what the rise in fuel did to her family. Marian's story is a perfect example of what happens when you have a broken transport system in this country. All this under an ANC government that has indeed lost its touch with the realities of millions of South Africans. Somebody must tell that to Honorable Sfiso Buthelezi of the ANC. Chairperson, the students of the University of the Free State, specifically those residing outside of campus, could be paying far less for public transport had the ANC-run Mangaung Metro been able to implement their integrated public transport network, otherwise known as the Hauweng bus service. This bus service, if operational, would have offered students an opportunity to be able to afford basic foods as opposed to spending more money on transport. Equally, the people of Kabani, Geelhout Park, and other areas in Rustenburg could have equally benefited from the Rustenburg Rapid Transport Bus Service, otherwise known as the Yarona Bus Service, had the ANC-run Rustenburg local municipality been able to fully operate this bus service in order to allow residents to save on the cost of public transport. But, Honorable Chairperson, like everything else under the control of the ANC government, it is the poorest of the poor who carry the biggest load from the mismanagement of state facilities and services. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Prince Z. Barnes Ngamashe of the ANC. Honorable Barnes Ngamashe, are you here?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Audible.
Yes, you are, Honorable Member. You disappeared.
I think technology. Are you able to see me? Can you see me, Chair?
It seems like you're in a unstable. Now I can see you, but let's hear the voice now. Honorable Ngamashe, unmute yourself if possible.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable.
I will recommend that you switch off your video, Honorable.
Let me just close the door.
Honorable Amash, it seems like you've got a challenge.
Thank you very much, Honorable Honorable members. Indeed, Honorable Chairperson, the increase in the cost of living. Am I audible?
Much better. Thank you so much.
Am I audible?
Far better.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Proceed, Honorable Member. I think you've got a connectivity challenge, Honorable Member. I will suggest that I would suggest that the ANC duty whip just try to assist you for the time being. Let me pass. I'll put you before the NFP. Honorable members, I will recognize COPE if they are on the platform, while Honorable Ngamashe is sorting himself and its stability of the network. Seems like COPE is not here. PAC. Honorable members of the ANC, Honorable Debulelo, if you can just chip in for Honorable Bans Ngamashe, if possible. Otherwise, he will forfeit his speaking time. It seems like there is no response on that regard. Honorable members, we shall proceed to the NFP. NFP, are you here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, the consumer inflation in South Africa spiked to 7.4% in June, an increase of 0.9% from May. Consumers say sometimes tough as goods and services are becoming more expensive. A spike in inflation has left many South African households with a cost of living crisis, and some are now struggling to adjust their monthly budgets for groceries, transport, water, and electricity. The June inflation data showed that maize meal prices had increased by 5% in a single month. The prices of brown bread and macaroni climbed 3%, cooking oils and fats were 33% higher, with the price of bologna going up by 19%. Now, these are basic stuff that people need on a daily basis. The rise in food prices spend more food than, are you there? To spend more money on food than they had spent previously. South Africa middle income earners spend up to 80% of their salary, Chairperson, within 5 days of payday. This means most survive on 20% of their monthly income for more than 20 days of the month. Now, if you look at the price of fuel and the increase in the price of fuel, and one of the reasons for that, Chairperson, is this, that Russia has offered us crude oil. The problem is that we do not have the facilities to refine them anymore because refineries are closed in South Africa. And so that is becoming a problem.
Honorable member, just wait. Honorable Magaxa and your team, just switch off your mic and your video, please. You are interrupting the speaker on the floor. Thank you. You may proceed, honorable member.
Yes, you know, over and above the food prices going, Chairperson, we have a problem in terms of spatial planning in the country, and you'd find that people generally work far away from home. So when there's a fuel price hike, it simply means that transport will cost you more. And since people live far away from where they work, and that is why we've always said you should have more development, industrial development, and things closer to where people live. And that's another problem that people are actually having. Food and non-alcoholic beverages rose by 9.7% year on year. And I'm not sure whether the statistics is correct, Chairperson. If you go into some of these supermarkets and you look at the price of these goods, you will realize that there's an exploitation taking place, because what we found is there's a monopoly, particularly in South Africa, when it comes to the food sector. Manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers are exactly the same people. And that is why if you go to the different big 5 supermarkets that you have in the country, you will find the prices are fixed with just a handful of them on special. Now, one of the other problems that we've experienced is, if you look at the high levels of unemployment in the country, what does it actually do? It puts more pressure on people, because generally, Chairperson, one person working in a home at the moment, they cannot survive. Both her fathers and mothers, husbands and wives have to work. Children have to even go and work on weekends to be able to survive. But I think what we must be very cautious about, Chairperson, is 46% of people in the country are on some form of social assistance, and this is not sustainable. And more importantly, people are more inclusive economy so people can actually earn that and be more productive and get back their dignity. I know my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And now we'll recognize Honorable Tlhape. Honorable Tlhape, you are advised that you may take the minutes of Honorable Prince Bans Ngamashi. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. I would request that I also switch the video off because of instability of the network here.
Please do so. Thank you.
Chair, when the African National Congress came into political power in 1994, we promised a better life for all South Africans. The commitment towards the realization of a better life for all is entrenched in the provisions of many of the ANC policy documents, including the 1943 African Claims, as well as the 1955 Freedom Charter. All these progressive policies of the ANC culminated into what today we know as the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, adopted in May 1996. Section 27 in the Bill of Rights guarantees to every South African the right to have access to sufficient food and water. The ANC uses land reform policy to broaden ownership of the economy by increasing participation within the agricultural sector, thus contributing to eradication of the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. In the last 3 years, about 170,254 hectares of land acquired under government's proactive land acquisition strategy has been released as part of land redistribution program. About 81,501 hectares of land were allocated to women, with 44,216 hectares allocated to youth and 489
On a point of order, Chair.
Allocated to people with disabilities.
Honorable 1 minute, there is a point of order.
Chair,
Honorable Cesar.
respectfully, can the member take the question, please?
Honorable Tlhape, are you prepared to take a question?
When I finish, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Honorable Chairperson, the department has developed the beneficiary selection and land allocation policy in order to realize transparency in the land allocation system, and also to ensure that 50% of land gets allocated to women, 40% to youth, and 10% to people with disabilities, and thus placing them at the center of land reform. Honorable Chairperson, we have just concluded conducting a joint oversight visit on the living and working conditions of the farm workers and farm dwellers. And while noting that a lot still needs to be done in order to improve the quality of their living conditions, we make mention that progress is being made in terms of extension of security of tenure. Since 2019, about 18,864 hectares of land have been released to labor tenants beneficiaries. This will further contribute to the reduction of food insecurity and hunger for labor tenants. Land restitution remains critical in changing the land ownership patterns in our country. And we know that in the last 3 years, a total of about 4.2 billion rand has been paid to the beneficiaries of land restitution program, and with a total of 185,366 hectares restored to its rightful owners. Increased access to land contributes meaningfully to local emerging farmers, and we welcome progress made in terms of releasing land to municipalities upon request, and further call on local municipalities to ensure that access to land by subsistence and smallholder farmers is made available in order to jumpstart their agricultural enterprises. We encourage all landowners to donate land in line with the land donation policy. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC would like to see land under communal tenure being put to full production. Agriculture remains the important sector of our economy, with a great potential to create a much needed job opportunities. In 2019, the sector contributed about 2.5% to the gross domestic product, with a gross value add of 69,048 billion, and created about 185,000 jobs in the same period. Government is continuing to fight the outbreak of foot and mouth disease. During the devastating period of COVID-19, government through relief program assisted 15,000 smallholder farmers with packages of up to 50,000 per farmer, and the Presidential Employment Stimulus Initiative, which to date has assisted close to 70,000 farmers and is expected to be extended to another 250,000 farmers in the 2022-23 production season to boost subsistence farmers who have shown appetite for assistance towards sustainable production. And this, Honorable Masango, was done throughout the country. We run a country as African National Congress, not only one province. And by the way, we will continue to feed and assist our people in the Western Cape. In dealing effectively, Chair, with high cost of living, government has ensured that there is an increased domestic agricultural activity in order to enable our agricultural markets to be self-sufficient. Through the development of district model plan, government is ensuring that there are target mechanisms and approaches to enhance the agricultural productivity of fresh produce from the rural producers with access to urban markets. In the medium and long term, the development of agro-processing supply and value chain through the rural-urban market linkages would not only enhance the standard of living for poor and marginalized urban and rural communities, but will equally ensure that most vulnerable sections of our society are protected through government-supported safety nets. Programs such as One Household, 1 Hectare are well placed and suited to ensure that the most vulnerable are cushioned against the impact of high cost of living. The access to markets by smallholder farmers, Chair, is facilitated through the Perishable Product Export Control Board. And a total of 118 farms were audited and 105 were subsequently certified to facilitate entry of Black farmers into diversified markets through the South African GAP program. Furthermore, in partnership with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, the department has embarked on targeted training to improve the marketing skills of smallholder producers through the Smallholder Horticulture Empowerment Program. Honorable members, in providing support and technical assistance to the farmers, government has embarked on an aggressive program to employ 10,000 extension officers. This recruitment will assist in serving the farmers as signified in the farmer registers that was launched in February 2022 and is aimed at rendering services to registered stakeholders. Through the blended finance model, government has reported that to date, 400 million rand
Honorable Klape, you disappeared when you mentioned the money. Honorable Klape, you did indicate. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Try to.
Sorry. Yeah, through the blended finance model, government has reported that to date, 400 million rand has been transferred to agri-industrial fund, run through the IDC with about 31 transactions in the pipeline amounting to close to 2.2 billion rand and a potential to create close to 1,400 permanent job opportunities. One of the measures that government employed in mitigating against the high cost of living is the promotion of community and household food gardens. The department has over time created over 3,200 food gardens with close to 64,000 households profiled. Through the CRDP, government is able to provide various skills and training opportunities in household food gardening, financial management, training in community-based planning, and training in indigenous seed production. Now, Honorable Chair, Honorable Cuthbert has spoken about the Honorable staying trip to Ukraine. And this happened while at home, KZN was flooding, Eastern Cape was flooding. And you wonder what is the priority here. But as always, ANC government intervened. And we want to also indicate that the government of the African National Congress has an economic reconstruction and recovery plan that is well researched for sustainability, and DA can keep its proposals. Honorable Tito, South Africa is not an island, and the global factors have also a bearing on our rising fuel and food prices. Hence, these interventions like your fuel subsidies and the programs that I've just alluded to. Honorable Majosi, likewise, you are not giving us comparisons of situations in other developing countries like South Africa, because as I've indicated, all these global factors has got a bearing, but otherwise I've given you some of the many programs that the ANC government is doing, especially on the agricultural sector. That let me show to see what our small-scale farmers are doing and tell us if it's different from the Brazilians. But otherwise, we must thank these small-scale farmers because we add today. Honorable Chairperson, we are a very resilient nation and we do not give up in the face of adversity. Whatever challenges we face as a country, our people are able to unite and confront them. It is on this account we join the President in calling for a social compact within the agricultural sector that will ensure that it flourishes and the job opportunities created. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Tlape. That will bring us for me to recognize Honorable Masango, B S Masango of the DA. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson. As I thank the colleagues, the members of Parliament for their contributions and their participation in this debate, I wish to emphasize that the issue of food prices and the food insecurity crisis is a real issue in South Africa. Just yesterday, I was honored and privileged to go to a community in New Lentegeur here in Cape Town, where one organization is providing food and has been doing that for 30 years for an entire community that is in need of food. This organization is doing that without any asking for any help from anyone other than the donations that it has. But this speaks to a collaborative and a supportive partnership that organizations in communities need to have with their government. And the City of Cape Town and the DA-run Western Cape Department of Agriculture are doing just that. I wish to say to Honorable Tlape, through you, Chairperson, that the line that she opened with of people of this country having been promised a better life for all. There are people who are waiting since 1994 to actually see this better life realizing in their own lives. And because that has not happened yet. We are now at a situation where through government failures in corruption, in mismanaging of government, of public coffers, people are dying of hunger and nothing else. And this has been done, or this has been brought about by things that are beyond the control of anyone, even including the ANC government. But partly the ANC government has been a huge player in making this country become such an embarrassment and such a disappointment for the people who were so happy to hear that they will be getting a better life for all. I wish to thank you, Chairperson, and as again, the participation of all the members of Parliament in this debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masango. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. We shall proceed now to the third order of the day, which is the first reading debate on maintenance bill. I will now recognize Honorable Hendricks, MG Hendricks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair, Honorable members. Thank you for taking part in the first reading debate on Al Jamaah's amendments to the Maintenance Act, number B17, in its first private member's bill that I've tabled with the Speaker, followed by an explanatory summary of the amendments that was published in the Government Gazette on the 21st of December 2021, Gazette number 45616. And then on the 5th of September the announcement was made that the bill will be introduced to Parliament and referred to the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development of the National Assembly, as well as a referral to the joint tagging mechanism for classification in terms of Joint Rule 160. Honourable House Chair, the two amendments are as follows. One, provision for the applicant, which may be the mother, gogo, grandmother, or carer, to get cash like the defendant, which is mostly the father, to travel to the maintenance court. Two, Honourable House Chair, a mediation and arbitration provision to speed up the determination to grant maintenance and to determine the amount of maintenance per child. There is a need for these two amendments for the sake of children whose fathers, in spite of a law that requires them together with the mother of the child to maintain their offspring, but fails to do so, leaving the mother who may have no financial means, the gogo or caregiver with no means to put food on the table for these needy children. Hundreds and thousands of children in South Africa suffer this plight. This week, the Nelson Mandela Foundation has launched an initiative to address this hunger, which has reached astronomical proportions, and Parliament is debating the rapid increase in the cost of living. We must prevent children from dying of hunger, especially during the term of the 6th Parliament. This is not a legacy that the 6th Parliament should leave behind, and Al-Jamaa calls on the honourable members to support the two amendments to the Maintenance Act that is before them for their consideration. Children are often used as pawns in disputes between their mother and father, and this can also lead to gender-based violence. The next and first step is to remove the challenges faced by the mother or gogo or caregivers, which will assist them to take the non-payment of maintenance by the father to the maintenance court, which is often a distance away from locations, rural villages and townships, and even from some of the leafy and beachy suburbs. The mothers and gogos must take 3 to 4 taxis or a train or bus to get to the nearest maintenance court. For this, they must incur debt to get there, or even go without food so they can pay these costs to lodge a claim in order to get relief, so they too can put food on the table for the child. The sad thing is that it stands in the Maintenance Act. The father who defends the action gets a subsistence allowance, and the complainant, the mother or gogo, does not receive such assistance. The most glaring injustice in the Maintenance Act is Section 5 of the Maintenance Act of 1998. The section says subsistence and travel allowance is made available to the defendant to get cash to pay for traveling to the maintenance court and to pay for accommodation if it is needed. So men receive a cash allowance, but no such relief is provided to women who approach the maintenance court for relief. The amendment proposed by Al-Jamaa provides for women to get the same amount of subsistence allowance as men so they can attend the maintenance court hearings without making a dent in their meager income, if any. This amendment will remove discrimination against women and reduce gender-based violence while the dispute is being attended to, and it will assist in putting food on the table for the child. It is clear that the first step to deal with men who do not pay popgeld, as it is popularly called, is to assist women to get to the maintenance court. Honourable House Chair, the second amendment is a new provision in the Maintenance Act for statutory mediation and arbitration. It is the insertion of Section 14A in Act 99 of 1998. The following section is hereby inserted in the Principal Act after Section 14, under the heading Alternative Dispute Resolution. Should the parties to a maintenance inquiry or investigation to elect to resolve any dispute arising therefrom through mediation or arbitration, the clause reads, such disputes shall be referred to mediation or arbitration in accordance with the applicable rules of the rules regulating the conduct of the proceedings of the Magistrates Courts of South Africa. The rules regulating the conduct of the proceedings of the Magistrate Courts of South Africa means the rules made by the Rules Board for Courts of Law under Section 6 of the Rules Board for Courts of Law Act 1985, which is Act 107 of 1985, read with Section 96A of the Jurisdiction of Regional Courts Amendment Act 2008, Act 31 of 2008, with the approval of the Minister responsible for justice. Women who are most often the applicants in maintenance have the extra stress placed on them to be an investigator in maintenance cases, simply to ensure that the father assists in his responsibility as a parent. Die wat beweer moet bewys. The complainant must prove. Too often women have to provide evidence that men has an income, having to run around securing proof of employment of the defendant. Key stakeholders from religious bodies, NPA, justice, advocates, attorneys, and maintenance actives, to mention but a few, was in attendance of a webinar called by Al-Jamaa on the second last Women's Month. Several social justice activists for the rights of women have called for amendments to be made to the Maintenance Act, which will speed up the process of application and ensure fair and just rulings to matters impacting on mainly women and children. Several issues was raised during the webinar which needs to be addressed. Suffice to note, Al-Jamaa was advised to start the changes by addressing of most glaring injustices in the Maintenance Act, and we were cautioned not to make too many changes all at the same time. Sadly, more often than not, the plaintiff, who is more often than not female, being the mother, grandmother, or caregiver in whose care the child has been placed and who is struggling to make ends meet, is not provided with the same relief as the defendants, which is mostly males. Yet it is the plaintiff who approached the Maintenance Court for relief of maintenance to ensure that she is able to effectively cater for the welfare and best interest of minor children. But no stipend is provided to the plaintiff, despite they often having to spend days and hours at court, unable to work due to the concerning and outdated maintenance system we continue to experience in the justice system. More often than not, the plaintiff has to suffer gender-based violence, like we said earlier on, in the form of financial abuse. To have these further be implemented by an unjust justice system is not acceptable. The issues stemming from the webinar, which I referred to earlier on, which was held on Women's Day, are courts are clogged with maintenance applications, lack of empathy of clerks towards maintenance matters, government failure to respond or act on the unequal and ineffective Maintenance Act, lack of resources, staff shortage, and inadequate investigations and application of maintenance matters. Magistrates and prosecutors are occupied with criminal matters, and hence maintenance matters are impacted. Women are bullied by clerks to accept pittance for maintenance, lengthy delays, and constant postponements of matters. All this came out in the webinar. Loss of jobs suffered by applicants having to attend maintenance hearings. Children having reached maturity and maintenance still owing. All the above results in the plaintiff being impacted on financially. I look forward to the contribution of honourable members to support these two amendments as we continue this debate. Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable now, Honourable members, in terms of there will be no speakers list on this matter, and members may not speak for longer than 3 minutes upon being recognized by the presiding officer, which is myself. I will now recognize political parties in the same order as for the declarations of vote to their input. I now recognize the ANC. ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. Hello, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Yes, you may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Since the dawn of democracy, the ANC government has passed a substantial number of bills to further entrench the rights of South African citizens as espoused in our transformative constitution and the Bill of Rights. The legislation passed has been aimed at eradicating the legacy of transforming our society to reflect the demographics, geographical, race and gender spread of the country. Some of the legislation covers a range of areas such as health, welfare, justice, education, housing, and crime, where transformation was needed. Moreover, the ANC has passed legislation directed at uplifting, protecting, and empowering women. The legislation passed reflects the ANC commitment of bettering the lives of all South Africans, especially the disadvantaged sectors of society. The Maintenance Act of 1998 was introduced to rectify the injustice of past practices, make the justice system more people-friendly, and give maintenance courts more powers to make orders against defaulters. The act was enacted to ensure that more children receive the maintenance money due to them. It guarantees equal access for all women to protection from unjust treatment by people who undermine the rights of women and children. Through the act and other pieces of legislation, the ANC makes clear its commitment to a criminal justice policy that caters for the special needs of women and children. The Private Members Bill, Maintenance Amendment Bill 2022, acknowledges that the rights to maintenance ensures the well-being and development of those who would otherwise be left desolate and socially and economically vulnerable due to their lack of means, which is enforceable against those who have duty of care over a vulnerable person. This duty of care may arise as a result of parental or marital relations. The amendment bill acknowledges that while significant strides have been made to reduce the vulnerability of women and children in enforcing these rights, there are still legislative gaps which prevent meaningful access to those rights. The bill proposes amendments which are aimed at bringing the gap so as to allow for the relief contemplated in the Primary Act. As tabled, the purpose of the bill is to amend the Maintenance Act 1998 so as to provide for, one, the location where a person who is entitled to be maintained may submit a complaint for maintenance. Secondly, the powers of maintenance officers with regard to investigations and inquiries of maintenance matters. The third one, extending the payment of entitlement and allowance to complainants. And lastly, alternative disputes resolution in maintenance matters. As the ANC, we believe that since this is a first reading debate, we will interact with the bill and engage it fully once it is tabled before the committee. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now recognize Honorable DA.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. With your permission, I will not switch my camera on. The weather is quite bad.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. While the Private Members Bill is well conceived and addresses an issue that seriously needs a lot of attention and modernization, the bill nevertheless, in our view, requires quite a bit of work in order for it to effectively address the important issues it seeks to address. However, the Honourable Hendricks makes several good points. The first matter that is somewhat problematic in our view is the phrase, "on whose behalf." It is not sufficiently delineated and formulated. It needs to be strictly defined in order to avoid it being open to abuse, more particularly with regard to communities where women continue to be viewed as perpetual minors. A much clearer definition of the circumstances where under a claim for or complaint regarding maintenance can be instituted on behalf of a third party must be inserted and enumerated. In its current form, it is open to possible abuse and certain confusion. Complainant as a term needs a strict definition. The reference to arbitration is a sound approach, but such a complex principle cannot be enacted into law by mere insertion of a clause of this nature. Arbitration as a legally binding principle will need a much tighter definition and will require strict and specific regulation, lacking in this iteration of the bill. It will have to stipulate who is authorized to act as an arbitrator. It needs to stipulate what the legal effect of an arbitration agreement is or will be, and needs to deal with circumstances that will prevail should arbitration fail. The current iteration of the bill, while most laudable, needs quite a bit of drafting work done to avoid creating sloppy legislation and confusing lacunas with regards to serious issues. We look forward to engaging with the contents in more detail when the bill comes before the Portfolio Committee. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize Honourable EFF Member.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the Economic Freedom Fighters welcome the introduction of the Maintenance Amendment Bill by the honoured member from Al Jamaa. South Africa children and divorced women still face an uphill battle when it comes to securing maintenance support for their fathers and as well husbands respectively. Despite many advances made in securing that the law is friendly towards children and women, there remains a number of legislative gaps that needs to be addressed in order to ensure that both women and single mothers get the support they deserve. The bill acknowledges that the maintenance system remains in disarray, is slow, ineffective, clogged up, fairly unproductive to enforce rights. That maintenance debtors evade their legal duties to remain dependent, seemingly impunitive despite active maintenance orders. The court dates are stunned without providing reasons, resulting in matters being postponed or struck off the roll. The bill aims to introduce a few amendments, such as empowering the maintenance officer to institute an inquiry should a complaint be laid for maintenance. The bill also provides for alternative dispute resolution mechanism in cases of maintenance. We believe that this would be a cost-effective and a shorter way of ensuring that the best interests of the children are prioritized in maintenance disputes, which can often be quite toxic affair. We will engage with the bill at the committee further, but all indications are that we will be in support of it. It is a crucial legislative intervention for the countries such as ours, which has neglected the needs of children for a long time. We must take this opportunity to call on all men in this country to not wait for courts to support their children. Being a deadbeat father is the ultimate form of uselessness. Real men support their children. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize Member of the IFP.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Section 28 of the Bill of Rights in our Constitution states that every child has the right to basic nutrition, shelter, basic health, care service, and social services, as well as the right to be protected from maltreatment, neglect, abuse, and degradation. In our country today, many children face high levels of physical, sexual, verbal, and emotional abuse, as well as sustained neglect and exploitation. Despite the expectation that children will be kept safe, interactions with families and homes often leave young children vulnerable. One means of protecting vulnerable children from this injustice is legislation. The Maintenance Amendment Bill or Act 99 of 1998.
Honourable Member, switch off your video because your connectivity gets interrupted. Then you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair. The Maintenance Amendment Bill originates from a series of amendments to the initial Maintenance Act 99 of 1998, which aims to ensure that all parents honor their duty to maintain and support their child or children. However, as many parents have defaulted on court judgments to pay maintenance in the past, the Act was amended to the Maintenance Amendment Bill, Act number 9 of 2015, which, oh my God. what is happening now, which would assist in tracing maintenance defaulters and issue a warrant of arrest if necessary. The responsibility of a child or children rests with both parents, as it is a duty of both parents to support their child or children until they are independent and self-supporting. In the event that parents are negligent and their maintenance payment, the court can take the money from their salary, their investment account, auction their property, or issue a warrant of arrest. The maintenance amount can also increase or decrease depending on the financial circumstances of the child or of the children's parents. The IFP welcomes the fact that the Maintenance Amendment Bill safeguards the integrity of these responsibilities. The intention to expand the powers of maintenance officers to further provide for the option to refer disputes to mediate or arbitration is a welcome means of increasing capacity. We wish to highlight and reiterate the importance of the powers of the maintenance officers, as these officers are instrumental in the investigation of complaints, ensuring that the child or children get the financial support they need. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the member of FF Plus. Honorable Member FF Plus. Okay, we shall proceed then. Member SADP.
Thank you, House Chair. What about the FF Plus? May I go ahead or FF Plus?
There were silence. I guess they are not in the platform. You may proceed. They would have indicated as such.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
Chairperson, point of order, there's no declaration from a Freedom Front.
But there's no point of order. You didn't respond earlier on. Okay. Thank you very much. Honorable Swart, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. In this time of dramatically increasing cost of living, the issue of maintenance becomes all the more relevant, and it is a very necessary part of poverty alleviation, particularly for single mothers struggling to make ends meet. The ACDP thus welcomes this initiative by Mr. Hendricks. As the memorandum of the bill points out, the right to maintenance ensures the well-being and development of those who would otherwise be left desolate and socially and economically vulnerable due to their lack of means, which is enforceable against those who have a duty of care over such vulnerable persons. While significant strides have been made to reduce vulnerability of women and children in enforcing these rights, there are still glaring legislative and resultantly systematic gaps which prevent meaningful access to these rights. And these proposed amendments aim to bridge those gaps effectively and empower vulnerable applicants to realize their constitutional rights and to improve access. Now, Mr. Hendricks has clearly heard from communities and has proposed a number of amendments that will go a long way to assist complainants in obtaining much needed and deserved maintenance. For example, where a complainant is a minor, the person acting on the minor's behalf may submit a complaint. Clause 6 states that parties involved in a maintenance matter may elect to have the dispute resolved through an alternative dispute resolution, and this process may be helpful, given the fact that our courts are overloaded and unable to deal expeditiously with all the maintenance and other cases. Clause 5 is also important as it further extends the entitlements and allowances provided to witnesses in terms of the Act to maintenance complainants as well, and this will assist already struggling single mothers, single parents to attend court to claim maintenance. There are a number of issues that do require redrafting, as pointed out by the Honourable Breitenbach, to achieve the desired outcome with legal certainty. And the ACDP looks forward to engaging further with the bill in this regard, but we do commend Mr. Hendricks at this stage. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Now I recognize Honourable Member UDM. UDM. I recognize Member ATM. Good. Honourable Member Good. Okay. Honourable NFP.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, at the very outset, allowed me to advise you that the National Freedom Party will support any amendment to the maintenance bill that will make it a lot easier for children maintenance to be paid. Now, as much as 60% of children in this country under the age of 10 don't live with their biological fathers, the second highest rate of absence in sub-Saharan Africa after Namibia. We believe that this bill may potentially be an important piece of legislation that will deal with the broken moral fiber we have in our communities currently and close the gaps. What we find, and let me tell you about some of my observations, Chairperson. First of all, there is a process of mediation, does exist, but I think it's behest of the maintenance officers or magistrates that are hearing these matters. But one of the major problems that we have on the ground is the proof of employment, as Honorable Hendricks has alluded to. And more importantly, on those that are self-employed, but also there's a problem of collusion between employers and employees and fail to provide the necessary documentation in terms of proof of income. Then the other problem that they tend to be having, Chairperson, is the delivery of service of documents, particularly when they are in different provinces. And all these have to be borne by the mother, who does not have the resources, does not have the time, does not have a vehicle more often than not. And more often than not, there's this hide and seek game that is played with by fathers where they evade this delivery or service of documentation, which makes it very difficult. More importantly is the fact that when they go to this maintenance court, it's such a laborious task, Chairperson. And, they don't get the due respect and many of these maintenance courts. The queues are long, waiting time is long, postponements take place all the time. So it does, impugn the dignity of these particular mothers who are going there just for what they rightfully deserve. If you look at last year, Chairperson, 91,000 children gave birth to children. Can you imagine where we are actually heading as far as this is concerned? So we believe a lot of work needs to be done. And more importantly, fathers are forgetting that these children have to live. They have to dress. They need medical. They need education. And more importantly, there appears to be a fight, Chairperson. And children are used in this fight between mothers and fathers, both trying to attack and get at each other. So I think in this bill, there's a lot of work needs to be done. And I'm sure we will address all these things. The NFP will support any attempt on any amendment to ensure that we protect the rights of these children. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Member of the AIC. AIC, okay. I recognize member of the COPE member, Honorable Member. I recognize the PAC.
Honorable Chair, the PAC will support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the member of the EFF.
We already spoke, Chair. EFF
Oh, you
already...
Okay, you are fine, never mind. Okay.
No, we already spoke, Chair.
Yes, I'm aware, but in terms of the schedule here, it does indicate and reflect you can come back. But
You
nevertheless,
must leave out the again.
Oh, no, wait, Honorable Ntlangwini, allow me to proceed. DA, do you still wish to come back? I guess not, as well as the ANC. Then, honorable members, if you agree with me on this one, so that we conclude, allow me to recognize Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hendricks, I would wish to advise you, you've got 5 minutes, 6 minutes instead of 5 minutes, because you left 1 minute earlier on when you were introducing the bill. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. I'm very humbled by the responses of honorable members, which shows that they hold children dear to their heart. I'm also encouraged that honorable members are prepared to further assist when this comes before the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development. Honorable House Chair, Section 9 of the Constitution provides as follows, as it defines the right to equality. Everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law. Equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms. To promote the achievement of equality, legislative and other measures designed to protect or advance persons or categories of persons disadvantage by unfair discrimination may be taken. As a state, we may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including gender, sex, pregnancy, and marital status. Yet we find ourselves doing all of those through this glaring omission. Discrimination on one or more of the grounds listed in subsection 3 is unfair unless it is established that this discrimination is fair. I put forward that such unfairness cannot be argued away. There is absolutely no rational reason for the existing discrimination. I argue unequivocally that the law as it currently stands does not hold constitutional muster. It is only through this amendment that we can comfort ourselves that the hard fought for right to equality for all, especially those most vulnerable in our society today, will be achieved in this amendment. I point out that the majority of applicants in maintenance cases are women due to social gender norms which continue to isolate and discriminate against women. The current laws amplify this discrimination. We must consider further the following. The length of time taken to decide matters has direct repercussions on days women have to take off work and the resultant loss of income for women who are approaching our courts for help and relief. And what do we give them? Hours of waiting in a queue, exposed to the elements, as some honorable members have mentioned, and going hungry while their children do the same at home, only to be turned away and told to come the next day for more hours of waiting and worrying about where and how they will ensure that their children eat a warm meal or any meal at all for the days which will come. How will they ensure there's electricity so their children can study for sufficient hours in the day as night falls, and simply get them to wash in warm water, and how they will afford the transport costs to get their children to school for the days to follow. Because many of them have had to forego their day's wages and taken off what little they have to pay for the taxi rides to the court and back again and again and again and again. Meanwhile, we offer the respondents who have the resources, mainly men, and who are there because of their default in fulfilling their basic obligation to their children, a stipend to accommodate for wages lost and even to pay for accommodation if they are commuting certain distances to court, etc. This further creates the increased vulnerability of women who have to develop strategies to accommodate for shortfalls, creating further debt and economic deprivation and risk while awaiting and pursuing the ever-elusive award of statutory remedies. This cannot seem to be fair. We cannot say that we are allowing these women the right to equality before the law. We can definitely not say that we are affording them their right to equal protection and benefit of the law. Because equality clauses now it demands the full and equal employment of all rights and freedoms, including by the women, we are thus far discriminating against through this glaring omission in our law. With regard to arbitration, currently where there's a deadlock in resolving the dispute of fact in maintenance claims, parties are told to resolve the matter through mediation on their own, and the matter is left pending. The reneging party may stall the proceedings ad infinitum while the applicant is left without recourse and without adequate means to take care of the dependent children. Arbitration ensures a speedier, specialized and decisive forum for dispute resolutions, which may assist to reduce the burden of hanging cases on the court roll, and which can aid to resolve their parties' factual dispute through the engagement of specialized professionals in an effective manner, while the ultimate award will still be subject to judicial oversight and decision. This will assist the court by placing relevant information before it in a speedier and effective manner. Considering all of these concerns, we are placed before you the private members' bill to set right the wrong that has burdened generations of women and which continues to do so. If we do not address these glaring gaps, then we should take the responsibility for the harmful effects that are occurring within and outside of our families and communities. Al-Jamaa would like to put on record the support of Parliament, the support of the legal team and the legislative arm of Parliament. While we drafted the bill and submitted it for ratification and constitutional muster, the legislative arm of Parliament went the extra mile to provide all the assistance that we need. And I would like to encourage honorable members to take the time and look at the legislation, especially that harms the equality that we are all striving for, and also together with the governing party, present legislation to improve the lot of the most vulnerable in our society. Once again, Al-Jamaa is very humbled by the responses and support and the offer to further assist in coming up with amendments to the Maintenance Act that will help children. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hendricks. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this mini plenary session. The mini plenary will now rise, honorable members.
Viva, Chairperson, viva.
Thank you.